Come close now, child of sorrow. Come sit by this fire that's burning low like the last breath of music forgotten souls. I's an old keeper of chains, a witness born from the belly of them auction blocks where the gavel music fell like thunder and split families like dry wood. My voice carries the weight of iron collars that bit into flesh, the wisdom of root doctors who whispered prayers in the dark, and the deep throbbing ache of mamas who watched their babies torn from their arms and sold like cattle under the whip shadow. Tonight I bring you the saga of Hannah de Caravana, the mother who walked 800 kilometers in chains and strangled the devil with that same iron curse come nightfall. Her story ain't written in no white man's book. No, sir, it lives in the wind that still blows through them cotton fields, in the cry of mothers who never saw their children again, in the blood-soaked red clay of Georgia that drank suffering and never forgot. This here's memory made sacred pain turned to testimony. So hush now, and listen to the echoes that refuse to die. The sky cracked open the day they sold baby Ruth. Not with thunder, no, with the sound of a gavel hitting wood. That terrible crack that splits the world in two and sends souls screaming into the abyss. Hannah stood on that auction block in Richmond, Virginia. Her arms empty as a grave, her breasts still dripping milk for a child who wasn't there no more. Sweet Jesus. The air hung thick with August heat and human misery. The smell of sweat mixing with fear, the stink of white men's greed rising like smoke from hell itself. She'd been standing there since dawn, her feet bare on them hot wooden planks, the sun's skin her back raw. Lord have mercy. Around her neck hung the iron collar, already biting into flesh, the weight of it pulling her spirit down toward the red clay earth. Her hands, them hands that had picked cotton till the fingers bled, that had birthed 3 babies in the dark quarters, that had held little Ruth just hours before, now hung at her sides, shaken like dry leaves in a death wind. The crowd pressed close, white faces blur, red with heat and whiskey, planters in fine coats, their eyes cold as river stones, calculating her worth like she was livestock. Traders with leather notebooks scribbling numbers next to souls, women in bonnets fanning themselves gossips full of judgment. And there in the front, sitting high on his horse like the devil's own messenger, was Slade. Now listen here, child. Slade wasn't just a man, he was a curse wrapped in human skin, a soul already sold to darkness, tall and lean like a whip and post, eyes the color of winter steel, mouth twisted in a smile that never reached nowhere good. He wore black from head to toe, a preacher's coat stained with road dust and dried blood. Folks swore on their lives. They seen him break a man's spirit just by looking at him. That land carried heavy spirits, and Slade walked among them like he owned them all. The auctioneer's voice cut through the suffering air. Strong-backed woman, good breeder, 3 live births. Who will start the biddin'? Clears throat. Hannah's heart beat like African drums, wild and desperate. Her eyes searched the crowd, searched for Josiah, her 12-year-old boy with the laugh like river water, already sold that morning to a cotton planter heading west. Searched for Eliza, 9 years old with eyes wide as the moon, gone to a fancy house in Charleston. And baby Ruth, Lord of Glory, 11 months old, still kneading her mama's breast. Music ripped away, screaming just an hour past. Sold to a woman in a yellow dress who didn't even look at her face. The numbers climbed. 700, 809. Slade's voice rang out like a judgment. 1,000. The crowd went quiet, deathly quiet. The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air like a bird of prey. Hannah felt the iron collar tighten, felt her knees want to buckle, but she stood. Strong-willed woman, fierce. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her fall. Sold to Mr. Slade for the Mississippi Coffle. The gavel fell. The sky didn't crack again, it just went dark. Even though the sun still burned, music. Hannah felt hands grab her arms, drag her down from the block, chain her wrist to wrist with other souls bound for the same hell. 27 of them, she'd learn later. 27 bodies yoked together for an 800-kilometer march into the Cotton Kingdom's hungry mouth. As they led her away, she turned back one last time, searching for her babies in that sea of white faces. But they music was gone, vanished like smoke, gone with the wind. And there was Slade sitting on his horse, smiling that devil's smile, his black coat, music, flapping in the hot wind like crow's wings, the iron bit cold, colder than winter river water, colder than an overseer's heart, cold like death itself pressing against living flesh. Hannah felt it close around her neck that first time, heard the metal click shut like a coffin lid, felt the weight settle on her shoulders like all the sorrow in the world had found a home. Lord have mercy. The collar was thick as a man's wrist, rusted at the edges where other souls' blood had dried and flaked away. It rubbed raw against her collarbone, scraped the soft hollow of her throat with every breath. Music. "Get in line." Slade's voice cracked through the suffering air. They stood in the yard behind the auction house, 27 souls now chained neck to neck, wrist to wrist, a human serpent of misery waiting to crawl south. The late afternoon sun beat down like a cruel master's hand, turning skin to leather, drawing sweat that stung where the iron had already opened wounds. Hannah's eyes moved along the line, memorizing faces she'd walked beside all the way to hell. There was Isaiah, a giant of a man, strong-backed and fierce-looking, with shoulders broad as an ox yoke and hands that had known the blacksmith's hammer. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes sweet Jesus. His eyes held fire that wouldn't be put out. Beside him stood Delilah, a root woman from the tobacco lands, her gray hair wrapped in a faded cloth, lips moving in silent prayer to ancestors only she could see. Behind Hannah was Cos Moses, no relation to the famous one, just a field hand with scars across his back like a map of suffering, meddling in small rebellions that had cost him pieces of his soul. Further down the line, Mercy, 16 and scared to death, belly just starting to show with a child she'd been forced to carry. Old Samuel, 70 if he was a day, blind in one eye from an overseer's fist, feet so swollen they looked like they might burst. Little Jacob couldn't be more than 8, holding tight to his sister, Monopearls. Hand, both of them orphaned when Massa sold their mama downriver. Ruth, not Hannah's Ruth. Another Ruth, heavy-hearted and lost in this world, who kept whispering the Lord's Prayer over and over like it might break the chains if she said it enough times. 27 souls, some strong, some weak, some already half dead inside, all bound for the Deep South's Cotton Kingdom, where the work killed you slow and the heat killed you fast. Slade circled them on his horse, that black coat flapping, whip coiled at his side like a sleeping snake. 2 other white men rode with him, cutler and mean-eyed and tobacco-stained, and Briggs, younger but no less wicked, with a rifle across his saddle and a look that said he'd use it for sport. "Listen here," Slade's voice cut through. "We got 800 kilometers to walk. You fall, you stay fallen. You run, the dogs hunt you. You cause trouble. You meet the post. Clear." Silence thick as swamp water. I said clear. "Yes, sir," they mumbled, a chorus of broken spirits. Slade's eyes scanned the line and stopped on old Samuel. The old man was swaying on his feet, breath coming in short gasps, swollen legs barely holding him up. The devil smiled. "That one won't make it past sundown tomorrow," Slade said to Cutler loud enough for everyone to hear. "Waste of chain space." Old Samuel's one good eye went wide with fear. Hannah felt her heart clench. The old ones warned us about men like this. Men who saw souls as nothing but dollars and pounds of flesh. Slade dismounted, walked slow along the line, boots crunching on gravel. He stopped in front of a woman Hannah hadn't noticed before. Esther, maybe 35, with a belly round as the moon. Music. 8 months gone, maybe more. She stood with one hand protecting that unborn child, the other gripping the chain that connected her to Isaiah. "This one's carrying," Slade said, like he'd just discovered something interesting. "How far along?" Esther's lips trembled. 7 months, Massa?" Slade laughed, a sound like nails on a coffin. Well, we got ourselves a problem." He turned to face them all, that devil's smile spreading wide. "See, a pregnant woman slows the whole line down, and I don't abide slowness." The iron collar suddenly felt heavier. Hannah's breath caught. Isaiah's massive hands clenched into fists. Delilah's lips moved faster in prayer. Slade pointed at old Samuel and then at Esther. "One of you won't see Alabama. Maybe both." He mounted his horse again, looked down at them like a god of cruelty. "We march at dawn 20 mer a day, rain or shine, heat or cold. You fall, you stay for the buzzards." He pointed directly at Esther, his finger like a curse. "And I'm already pointing at you, gal. You and that baby ain't my concern." Dawn broke red as blood over Virginia Clay. The sky looked like it was bleeding, music child, streaks of crimson stretching across the horizon like wounds that wouldn't close. And them old folks say, when the dawn comes red like that, death is walking close behind. Lord have mercy. Hannah woke to the sound of chains rattling, bodies stirring in the dirt where they'd slept the night, 27 souls bound together like cattle waiting for slaughter. Her neck throbbed where the iron collar had rubbed raw. Her wrists ached from the shackles, and her breasts still leaked milk for a baby who was gone. staining the thin cotton shift they'd given her at the auction house. Up on your feet. Cutler's voice split the dawn like an axe. They rose slow, bodies stiff and hurting, the chain pulling tight as each person struggled to stand. Old Samuel groaned loud, his swollen legs barely holding him, and down the line, Esther clutched her pregnant belly, face twisted in pain. Hannah's eyes found Isaiah. That giant man looked back at her with something like recognition, like he knew they was bound by more than iron. Now they was bound by survival. Slade emerged from his tent, black coat already on despite the heat that was building, hat pulled low over them winter steel eyes. He walked the line slow, inspector in his property, whip coiled at his belt like a sleeping serpent ready to strike. Sweet Jesus. When he stopped in front of old Samuel, the silence got thick as swamp water. Still breathing, old man? Slade's voice carried mockery sharp as broken glass. Samuel's one good eye looked up. Yes, sir, massa, still here. We'll see how long that lasts. Slade moved on, stopped at Esther, looked at her belly like it offended him. You better keep up, gal. That baby ain't going to slow my profit. They fed him then. Corn mush in a trough like they was hogs. No plates, no spoons, just hands scooping up what little sustenance masses mercy allowed. Water came from a single bucket passed down the line. 27 mouths drinking from the same rusty dipper. Hannah forced herself to eat, even though her throat closed up with grief. Got to stay strong, she told herself. Got to live to see my babies again. Move out. The march began. Step by cursed step, they walked south on that red clay road. The sun climbing higher and turning the world into a furnace. The chain connecting them pulled and jerked with every movement. When one stumbled, the whole line felt it. When one fell, they all stopped. Slade rode ahead on his horse. Cutler and Briggs flanking the line with rifles ready. Whips crack in the air whenever someone slowed. By midday, the heat was killing heat. The kind that makes you see things that ain't there. That pulls the water right out of your body and leaves you dizzy and sick. Old Samuel was falling behind, dragging his feet, breath coming in short gasps that sounded like death rattling in his chest. The chain pulled tighter on Hannah's neck as he struggled, and she turned back to see him. Come on, old father, she whispered, though Slade had forbidden talk. Just a little further. But Samuel's legs gave out. He collapsed in the middle of that red clay road, hitting the ground hard, and the whole line jerked to a stop. The iron collars bit into necks, wrists twisted in shackles, and somewhere down the line, little Jacob started crying. Slade wheeled his horse around, that black coat flapping like death's own wings. What did I say about fallen? Please, massa, Delilah called out, her root woman's voice strong despite the fear. He just needs water and rest. Please, sir, have mercy. Mercy. Slade laughed that nail-on-coffin laugh. Mercy is what got us here in the first place. Too much mercy, not enough profit. He dismounted, walked over to where Samuel lay gasping in the dirt. This one's done. No. The word music burst from Hannah's mouth before she could stop it. No, he can make it. Give him a chance. Slade's eyes fixed on her. Cold, calculating, cruel. You speaking out of turn, gal. Hannah's heart hammered like African drums, but she stood her ground. Strong-willed woman, fierce. He's an elder, sir. He deserves. The whip cracked, not on her, but on Isaiah's back. The giant man didn't even flinch, but the message was clear. Speak again and someone else pays. Slade unlocked Samuel's collar, removed him from the chain like he was discarding a broken tool. The old man lay in the dirt, breathing shallow, that one good eye looking up at the sky like he was already seeing heaven. He slows us down. He stays. Slade's voice was flat as a judge's sentence. Rest of you, keep moving. We got 19 mi to go before nightfall. But massa, Delilah started move. They moved. Lord of glory. They moved. Leaving old Samuel there in the middle of that red clay road. Leaving him to die alone under the Virginia sun. Hannah looked back once and saw him raise one trembling hand. Whether in blessing or farewell, she couldn't tell. The tears burned her eyes, but she didn't let him fall. Wouldn't give Slade the satisfaction. That night they camped by a creek. Slade was in a foul mood, drinking whiskey by the fire while Cutler and Briggs stood guard. The enslaved sat in their chains, too tired to even whisper, music prayers. But Slade wasn't done with his cruelty. You. He pointed at Hannah, the one who music spoke up. Come here. Hannah's blood went cold, but she stood, the chain pulling on the others as she moved toward the fire. Isaiah tensed beside her, his massive fists clenching. But what could he do? What could any of them do? Slade pulled out a small leather-bound book, its pages filled with cramped handwriting. He opened it, running his finger down a list. Hannah, age 28, 3 live births purchased for $1,000. He looked up at her, that devil's smile spreading. You know what this is? She shook her head. This is my ledger. Every soul in this coffle, I got your name, your price, your value written down. You're all just numbers to me, merchandise. He snapped the book shut. But since you care so much about that old man we left behind, you can dig his grave. Sir, you heard me. Back there, mile marker 18, you're going to walk back in these chains, dig a hole with your bare hands, and when we find his body tomorrow, you're going to bury him proper. Cutler will escort you. The night was heavy with spirits, child. Hannah walked back up that road, Cutler riding beside her with his rifle ready, the moon hanging low and yellow like an eye watching from the darkness. When they found Samuel's body, already stiff, already visited by buzzards, she fell to her knees and started digging in that red clay with her bare hands. The earth was hard, her fingers bled, but she dug. Tears finally fallen now that no one but the dead could see. She dug until the hole was deep enough, then rolled Samuel's body into it, whispering the old prayers her mama had taught her, the ones in a language the Middle Passage had tried to drown but couldn't. As she covered him with earth, she saw something fall from Cutler's saddlebag. Slade's ledger dropped careless. She snatched it quick, hid it in her shift before Cutler noticed. When she opened it later by firelight, she saw all their names, all their prices written in Slade's cold hand, and she made a promise right then, kneeling beside old Samuel's grave with red clay under her fingernails and death in the air. One day she'd burn that ledger, and she'd burn Slade with it. In them days of deep sorrow, when the sun beat down like judgment and the chains bit deep as sin, there was one sound that kept the darkness from swallowing souls whole. The sound of Isaiah's voice singing low in the African tongue. Now listen here, child. Isaiah wasn't just any man. He was a giant, yes, with shoulders broad as a cotton wagon and hands that had shaped iron in the blacksmith's fire back in the tobacco lands of Virginia. But what made him mighty wasn't the muscle and bone. It was the spirit that lived inside him, fierce and unbroken as the day he was born. His skin was dark as midnight, his eyes held lightning. And when he sang, sweet Jesus, when he sang, the ancestors themselves leaned down from heaven to listen. The third day of marching was when Hannah truly met him. They'd walked 22 minutes under a sun that seemed to hate him person-alike. The red clay road turning to dust under their feet, clouds of it rising up and coating their skin, filling their lungs till every breath was a burden. Esther, the pregnant woman, was struggling bad, her belly heavy, her steps slow, face twisted in pain with every movement. The chain pulled tight between her and Isaiah, and more than once he'd slowed his own pace to keep from dragging her forward. Faster. Music. Cutler's whip cracked the air. Ain't got all day for you, lazy. Isaiah's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Just kept walking, kept supporting Esther's weight when she stumbled behind them. Music. Hannah watched and felt something stir in her chest. Respect, recognition, the knowing that this man was different. He carried his chains like they was made of music paper, bore his suffering like it was an honor, protected the weak like he was their appointed guardian. That night they camped in a clearing by a stand of pine trees, the air thick with resin and mosquitoes. Slade and his men built their fire separate, leaving the enslaved to huddle together in their chains, gnawing on hard tack and drinking from the creek. The moon rose full and heavy, casting silver light through the branches, and the night sounds started up. Crickets, frogs, the distant howl of something wild and free. That's when Isaiah began to sing, soft at first, barely a whisper. Words in a tongue Hannah recognized from the old ones back on the plantation. Yoruba, the language of her grandmother's grandmother, carried across the Middle Passage in the bellies of survivors. The melody was ancient, mournful, beautiful as sorrow itself. It wound through the chains like water, music touching each soul, wakened something that slavery had tried to kill. Arba Isaiah sang his voice deep as thunder far away. Hannah's throat tightened. She knew them words, heard him in dreams sometimes. God help us do. We walk this earth, but we will not forget. Others began to hum along. Delilah, music Moses, even young Mercy with her frightened eyes. The song grew, not loud enough to draw Slade's attention, just loud enough to remind them they was still human, still connected to something bigger than chains and whips and cruel masters. "You know the old songs," Hannah whispered to Isaiah when the melody faded. He turned to look at her, them lightning eyes seeing straight through to her soul. "My father was a go in the old country, storyteller, keeper of memory. They stole his body but couldn't steal his voice. He taught me before the fever took him. What was you singing? A prayer, a promise." Isaiah's voice dropped lower. "The ancestors hear everything, sister. They watching over us, even here in this hell. Long as we remember them, long as we sing their songs, we ain't truly enslaved." Hannah felt tears burn her eyes. "I got 3 babies out there sold away. I can't remember their faces clear no more." Isaiah's massive hand reached out slow, careful not to rattle the chains, and touched her shoulder gentle as a father's blessing. "Then we sing for them too. We remember for you till you can remember for yourself." In that moment, something shifted. The iron collar didn't feel quite so heavy. The road ahead didn't seem quite so endless. Bound in chains, they found kinship. But Slade was watching, always watching. The next morning brought rain. Cold driving rain that turned the road to mud and made every step a fight. They slogged through it for hours. Clothes soaked, skin pruned, the chains cutting deeper with every slip and stumble. Little Jacob fell twice, his sister Pearl pulling him up each time, both of them crying without tears because they was all cried out. By midday, Isaiah started singing again. Not the quiet prayer from the night before, but a work song. The kind field hand sang to keep rhythm, music, and stay sane under the overseer's eye. His voice rose strong and clear, cutting through the rain. "Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's going to trouble the water." Others joined in, the song building like a storm itself. Hannah felt her feet move lighter, felt the rhythm carry her forward even though her body screamed for rest. This was resistance, small but real, taking their own voices, their own power back, even just for a moment. Silence. Slade's voice cracked like lightning. The singing stopped. The only sounds was rain and chains and breathing. Slade rode up alongside Isaiah, that black coat dripping water, face twisted in rage. "You the one leading these songs?" Isaiah looked straight ahead, jaw set. "Yes, sir. You think I'm running a church choir here? You think this is Sunday service?" "No, sir. Just trying to keep folks moving, sir." "Keep them moving?" Slade's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "I'll show you how to keep moving." He dismounted, pulled the whip from his belt, and before anyone could blink, he brought it down across Isaiah's back. Once, twice, 3 times. The giant man didn't cry out, didn't fall, just stood there taking it, his muscles tense as iron, his eyes burning with a fire that wouldn't be put out. 10. Lashes. Music. 15. 20. The whip sang its terrible song, cutting through cloth and skin, opening wounds that bled red into the rain. Hannah watched, rage building in her chest like a fire that would burn the whole world down. Delilah muttered prayers. Moses clenched his fists so hard the nails drew blood. Little Jacob buried his face in his sister's shoulder. At 30 lashes, Slade finally stopped, breathing hard, whipped, dripping with blood and rain. That's what happens when you forget your place. Now get back in line. Isaiah swayed but didn't fall. Music. Blood ran down his back in rivers mixing with the rain. But when he looked at Hannah, his eyes still held that lightning, still held defiance. He started to walk 1 foot in front of the other, and the chain pulled the rest of them forward. That night, when they made camp and Slade's men was distracted with their whiskey, Hannah used water from the creek and strips torn from her shift to clean Isaiah's wounds. Her hands trembled as she worked, seeing the crisscross pattern of scars, old and new, that covered his back like a map of suffering. "Why you protect us?" she whispered. "Why you sing when you know it'll bring the whip?" Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, then said, "My father told me something before he died." Music. Said, "The body can be chained, beaten, even killed. But the spirit belongs to the ancestors, to the old gods, to something bigger than any master. Long as I got breath, I'm going to sing. Long as I got strength, I'm going to protect the weak. That's what it means to be free, even in chains." Hannah's throat closed, music up with emotion. She pressed her hand against his shoulder, felt the warmth of his skin, the terrible damage done to him. "You're a good man, Brother Isaiah." "We all good people, Sister Hannah, just surviving in an evil world." Later that night, after Isaiah had fallen into exhausted sleep, Hannah heard him moaning, fevered from the weapon. She stayed awake, keeping watch, praying to ancestors she barely remembered the names of. Delilah, the root woman, crawled close and pressed something into Hannah's hand, a small bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth. "Yarrow and comfrey," Delilah whispered. "Make a pus, keep the wounds from going bad." "Thank you, Mother. That man got the spirit of Aun in him, the warrior god. Slade can beat his body but never break his soul." Delilah's eyes gleamed in the darkness, but there's a cost to defiance. One day soon, Slade going to try to break him, music complete. Hannah looked at Isaiah's still form, heard his labored breathing, and made another silent promise. Whatever came, she'd stand with him, brother and sister in chains, bound by more than iron. Now the storm came down like the wrath of God himself. Not gentle rain, no, this was punishment rain, the kind that tears the sky open and drowns the world. It started just past noon on the 5th day of marching when they was deep in the Carolina lands, the road turning from red clay to black mud that sucked at their feet like it wanted to pull them straight down to hell. The sky went dark as midnight, though it was barely 2 o'clock. Clouds rolling in thick and heavy, pressing down on them like a weight that wouldn't lift. "Storm coming," Briggs hollered from his horse, but it was already there. The first drops fell big as coins, splatting against skin with force enough to sting. Then the deluge opened up. Sheets of water pouring down so thick you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Thunder cracking overhead like cannons in a war. Lightning splitting the sky in jagged white scars. Lord have mercy. The wind howled through the trees like all the souls that ever died screaming was caught up in it. And the temperature dropped so fast, Hannah felt her breath turn to mist. They was already soaked through in seconds, the thin rags they wore clinging to bodies like second skins, offering no warmth, no protection. The chains got slippery, harder to grip when someone stumbled. Little Jacob was crying, teeth chattering so hard the sound cut through even the storm. His sister Pearl tried to shield him with her own body, but what good was that against the sky's fury? "Keep moving." Slade's voice barely reached through the thunder. "Move your feet." But the road was disappearing underwater, turning into a river of mud. Hannah's feet slipped, caught, slipped again, behind her. Moses went down hard, dragging 3 people with him before they could brace. The iron collars bit deep as the chain went taut, cutting off air, and for a terrible moment, Hannah thought they'd all choke right there in the mud. Isaiah pulled them up with his massive strength, wounds on his back, screaming, but his face a mask of determination. "Up, come on now, up." They walked for another hour in that hellstorm until even Slade realized they couldn't go further. He found a clearing off the road, no shelter, no trees thick enough to block the rain, just open ground that was already ankle-deep in water. "Camp here," he shouted. "Cutler Briggs, get the tent up." But for the enslaved, there was no tent, no shelter of any kind. Slade rode his horse close to where they huddled, 27 souls chained together and shaken with cold. That devil's smile played on his lips as lightning flashed behind him, making him look like Satan himself risen from the pit. "Y'all going to spend the night right here?" he said, voice calm as Sunday service. "Chained up, no fire, no blankets. Maybe this will teach you to move faster tomorrow." "Massa, please," Delilah called out, her voice strong despite the fear. The children, "Shut your mouth, old woman, lest you want the whip." They stayed there all night long while the storm raged and the rain came down in torrents while the temperature dropped and music their bodies started to shake uncontrollable like. Cutler and Briggs guarded them from under a canvas tarp, music rifles ready, watching to make sure nobody tried to run. Not that running was possible. Where would they go chained together like that in the dark and the storm? Hannah pressed close to Isaiah on one side, music to mercy on the other, trying to share what little warmth their bodies still held. But it wasn't enough. Sweet Jesus, it wasn't near enough. The cold seeped into bones, into souls, into that deep place where hope lived and tried to kill it. Little Jacob's crying got quieter as the night wore on. Too quiet. "Jacob." Pearl's voice cut through the storm, panicked now. "Jacob, baby, talk to me." Hannah turned her head, tried to see through the darkness and rain. Music. The boy was still too still, his small body slumped against his sister. Pearl was shaking him, calling his name, but he didn't respond. "He's breathing," Pearl cried. "He's breathing, but he won't wake up. Please, somebody help." Delilah crawled as close as the chains allowed, put her hand on the boy's forehead. Even in the dark, Hannah could see the root woman's face change, could see the knowledge settle there like a stone sinking in deep water. "He's burning with fever," Delilah said. "Body shutting down from the cold. He needs warmth, needs it now." Or what? Slade's voice, music, came from the darkness. He'd emerged from his tent to check on his property, standing there in his black coat with a lantern in hand. "Or he dies. Then he dies. One less mouth slowing us down." "He's a child," Hannah heard herself shout. Rage overpowering fear. "Have you no soul?" Slade walked closer, held the lantern up so its light fell on his face. Cold, unmoved, empty as a grave. "He's merchandise, same as you. And if he can't survive a little rain, he ain't worth the space music on my coffle." The night wore on. Storm didn't stop. Just kept beating down on him like the world itself was trying to wash them away. Hannah felt her milk let down, that terrible reminder that somewhere out there, baby Ruth was crying for her, needing her, and she wasn't there. The milk mixed with rain and ran down her chest, wasteful and heartbreaking. Beside her, a woman named Dina, younger than Hannah, maybe 22, with a baby of her own sold just weeks before, started to weep. Not loud, just quiet tears mixing with the rain. Hannah reached for her hand in the darkness, squeezed it. "I can't do this," Dina whispered. "I can't walk no more, can't breathe no more, can't live like this no more." "Yes, you can," Hannah said, voice fierce. "You can 'cause you got to. We all got to. My baby girl. They sold her for $60. $60. That's what a human life worth to these devils." Hannah pulled Dina closer, felt the woman's body shaken with cold and grief. Her own breasts ached with milk that had nowhere to go. In that moment, something shifted inside her, a fierce maternal rage that burned hotter than any cold could touch. "Give me your baby's milk," Dina whispered. "Please, just so it don't go to waste." And there, in the storm, in the chains, in the mud and darkness, Hannah nursed another woman's grief. She guided Dina's mouth to her breast. Let her drink the milk meant for Ruth. Let her take what little comfort could be found in that act of shared humanity. It wasn't about the milk itself. It was about remembering they was human. They was mothers. They was more than the merchandise Slade claimed they was. When dawn finally broke, gray and cold and unforgiven, little Jacob was dead. The fever had taken him sometime in the night, quiet as a whisper. Pearl held his small body and screamed, a sound that tore the world apart. Moses tried to comfort her, but there was no comfort to be found. Delilah sang a prayer in the old tongue, words for the dead, for the ancestors to guide the child home. Slade emerged from his tent, looked at the dead boy with all the emotion of a man seeing a broken tool. "Unlock him, bury him shallow. We're behind schedule. Damn you." Pearl's scream cut across the clearing. "Damn you to hell, you devil!" The whip sang. Pearl went down, blood spraying from her back. 5 lashes, 10 until she couldn't scream no more, just lay there in the mud with her dead brother's body beside her. Hannah felt something break inside her chest. Not her spirit, but something else, the last piece of her that believed in mercy, in justice, in the goodness of God. It shattered like glass, and what rushed in to fill the empty space was pure, cold rage. As they buried Jacob in a shallow grave with nothing but their hands to dig, as Pearl wept over the loose dirt that covered him, as the sun came out and started to steam the water off their bodies, Hannah whispered to Isaiah, "I'm going to kill him." Isaiah's eyes met hers, lightning still there, burning bright. "Not alone, you ain't. When the time comes, sister, we do it together." Hannah looked at Slade across the clearing, saw him laughing with Cutler, saw him take a swig from his whiskey flask like he hadn't just watched a child die and ordered a girl whipped for grieving. She whispered it again, a promise, a prayer, a curse. "I kill him before we reach Alabama. I swear it on Jacob's grave. I swear it on my baby's names. I kill that devil or die trying. Now listen here, child. In every group of suffering souls, there's always one who breaks different than the rest. Not from the whip, not from the hunger, but from something deeper. Fear so strong it turns a man inside out, makes him betray his own blood for a chance at survival. In them days of deep sorrow, music that man's name was Jonas. Jonas was a field hand from the tobacco lands, maybe 30 years old, with skin the color of mahogany and eyes that never quite met yours straight on. He'd been chained in the middle of the coffle between a woman named Ruth, not Hannah's Ruth, the other Ruth, and a young man called Samuel Jr., who'd taken music, his dead father's name as a way of keeping memory alive. Jonas wasn't strong like Isaiah, wasn't wise like Delilah, wasn't fierce like Hannah. He was just music ordinary. The kind of man who blended into the background, who did what he was told, who survived by being invisible. But invisibility don't last when the devil's watching. It was the music's 7th day of marching, somewhere around mile marker 187, when Jonas made music his bargain with Slade. They'd stopped for the midday rest under a stand of oak trees, the shade a blessing after hours under the skin and heat. The enslaved sat in their chains, passing around the water bucket, gnawing on salt pork that was more maggots than meat. Isaiah's back was healing slow, the whip marks still angry and red. Pearl hadn't spoken since they buried her brother, just walked like a ghost with empty eyes. And Hannah. Hannah kept her rage locked tight in her chest, hiding it behind a face that showed nothing. Slade called Jonas over. "You," he said, pointing with his whip. "Come here." Jonas stood, the chain pulling on Ruth and Samuel Jr. as he moved toward where Slade sat on a fallen log, whiskey flask in hand. The others watched, tension thick as swamp water. Anytime Slade singled someone out, it meant trouble. "You've been talking to the others at night," Slade said. Not a question, a statement. Jonas's eyes went wide. "No, Sir Massa, I ain't. Don't lie to me, boy." Slade's voice was soft, dangerous. "I hear everything that goes on in my cough. The whispers, the plans, the little rebellions brewing in the dark. Now I can make this hard on you, or I can make it easy. Your choice. Sweet Jesus." The air got tight, like before a storm. Hannah felt her heart hammer against her ribs. They hadn't been planning nothing yet, just talking soft about survival, about keeping each other alive. But if Slade thought there was rebellion brewing, he'd make examples of them all. Jonas dropped to his knees. "Massa, please. I swear I ain't done nothing wrong." "I believe you," Slade said, and that was worse than accusation. "'Cause you ain't got the spine for rebellion, but others do." He leaned forward, voice dropping into a whisper the rest couldn't hear. "I'm going to offer you something, Jonas. You tell me who's stirring up trouble, who's whispering about running, who's plotting against me, and when we get to Alabama, I'll see about getting you sold to an easy master. Maybe even freedom papers if you prove yourself useful enough." Jonas's breath caught. Freedom. That word hit him like lightning, like salvation, like the North Star itself come down to earth. "But if you don't help me," Slade continued, "if you keep your mouth shut out of some misplaced loyalty, I'll make sure you end up in the cotton fields of the Delta, where men die screaming after 6 months. Your choice." The old ones warned us about moments like this when a man's soul stands at the crossroads and the devil offers him a way out. Some men choose right, holding on to their humanity even if it costs them everything. Some men choose wrong, selling their brothers and sisters for the promise of mercy that never comes. Jonas chose wrong. "Isaiah," he whispered. "Isaiah talks about resistance, about the ancestors giving us strength to fight back." Slade's smile was like a snake uncoiling. "Isaiah, of course, that big singing fool." "Who else?" "Delilah. She does conjure work at night, says she can call down curses on white folk. Delilah, the root woman." "Good. Anyone else?" Jonas hesitated then. "Hannah. She got anger in her, real deep anger. Says she'd rather die than live in chains." Hannah's blood went cold. From where she sat with the others, she couldn't hear the words, music, but she saw Jonas pointing in their direction, saw Slade nodding, writing something in that cursed ledger of his. When Jonas came back to the line, nobody spoke to him, but they knew. Lord of glory, they all knew. Delilah's eyes narrowed, Isaiah's jaw clenched, and Hannah felt the rage in her chest grow hotter, sharper, more dangerous. That night, as they made camp in a clearing by a creek, Jonas tried to explain himself. "I had to," he whispered to Samuel Jr., who was chained beside him. "He was going to kill us all. I just told him what he already suspected. It don't change nothing." Samuel Jr. turned his back. "You a traitor. Simple as that. I'm a survivor." "Nah." Moses's voice cut through the darkness deep and hard as iron. "You a slave to fear. and that's worse than being a slave to any master. From then on, Jonas was alone, even chained among them. He was isolated, an island of shame in a sea of shared suffering. Nobody spoke to him unless forced. Nobody shared extra water or food. Nobody offered comfort when the nights got cold. He'd chosen Slade over his own people, and there ain't no coming back from that. But the damage was done. The next morning, Slade announced new rules. From now on, any talk after sundown gets 20 lashes. Music. Any singing gets 40. Any sign of rebellion gets you sold separate from the group, which means the cotton fields, the rice swamps, or worse. He walked down the line, stopped in front of Isaiah. You the big man, the singer, you think you're special? Think you got some kind of protection from your African gods? Isaiah said nothing, just stared straight ahead. I'm watching you extra close now, Slade said. One wrong move, one word out of place, and I'll hang you from the nearest tree and let the buzzards, music, pick your bones. Understand? Yes, sir. Good. Slade moved to Delilah. And you, old conjure woman, you try any of your hoodoo tricks on me or my men, I'll burn you alive. They used to do that to witches, you know. Still legal in some places. Delilah's lips moved in silent prayer, but her eyes, Lord have mercy. Her eyes held murder. Finally, Slade stopped in front of Hannah. He studied her face like he was reading a book, then smiled that devil's smile. You, the one with the dead babies. Hannah's jaw clenched. My babies ain't dead. They dead to you, gal. Scattered across 3 states. Probably already forgot your face, but I hear you got anger in you. Anger's dangerous. Makes people do stupid things. He leaned close, voice dropping low. I'm going to break that anger. Going to break you so complete you'll forget you ever had the strength to feel it. He straightened up, addressed the whole group. Thanks to Jonas here, I know exactly who needs watching, so thank him. He just saved all your lives by pointing out the troublemakers before they got you killed. Nobody looked at Jonas. The shame on his face was thick enough to choke on. As they prepared to march again, Delilah managed to shuffle close to Hannah, whispered under her breath. That man's soul is poisoned now. He'll never know peace. Not in this life or the next. What about Isaiah? Hannah whispered back. Slade's got his eyes on him special now. Isaiah's strong, but strength can be dangerous when a devil's watching. Delilah pressed something into Hannah's palm. A small bundle wrapped in cloth, warm to the touch. Protection charm, made it last night while the guards was sleeping. Keep it close. You're going to need it soon. The march continued mile after mile under the burning sun, feet blistered and bleeding, chains, Clear's throat, cutting deeper every day. But now there was a new weight on them, the weight of betrayal, the knowing that one among them had chosen to serve the master instead of stand with his people. Jonas walked at the center of the line, isolated and alone, his deal with the devil written plain on his face, and every night after that, he'd wake screaming from nightmares, sweating and shaken, seeing things in the darkness that nobody else could see. Delilah said it was the ancestors punishing him. Moses said it was guilt eating him alive, but Hannah knew the truth. It was the knowledge that he'd sold his soul for a promise of freedom that would never come. 'Cause here's what Jonas didn't understand. Devils don't keep promises. And 3 days later, at mile marker 198, Jonas would learn that lesson the hard way. Slade had him point out Isaiah as the leader of a rebellion that didn't even exist yet, and by sundown, the giant would be dancing at the end of a rope. The tree was an old oak, twisted and gnarled like the hand of God reaching down to touch the earth. Its branches spread wide, cast in shadows that looked like fingers pointing at judgment, and Spanish moss hung from it like the beards of ancient prophets. They say that tree had seen hangings before, slaves who tried to run, who'd raised their hands against masters who dared to dream of freedom. The ground beneath it was stained dark, not from rain, but from music blood, and tears soaked so deep into the red clay that nothing would ever wash it clean. Dawn was breaking over the Georgia lands, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold when Slade music gave the order. Bring the big one forward. Isaiah didn't resist, didn't fight or beg or plead. He just stood when they unlocked his collar from the chain, his massive body moving slow and deliberate like a mountain accepting its fate. The whip marks on his back had barely started to heal. The wound still angry and seeping, but his face, Lord have mercy. His face was calm as Sunday morning, eyes fixed on something far beyond what the rest of them could see. Hannah felt her heart tear in half. No. The word ripped from her throat before she could stop it. He ain't done nothing. Music. You got no cause. Slade turned to look at her, that devil's smile spreading across his face. Cause? I don't need cause, gal. I'm the law out here. I'm judge, jury, and executioner. And Jonas here tells me this one's been stirring up rebellion. Jonas stood off to the music side, face gray as ash, unable to meet anyone's eyes. He'd thought his betrayal would buy him mercy, but all it bought him was the weight of Isaiah's death on his soul. String him up, Slade ordered Cutler and Briggs. They brought the rope, thick hemp, rough and unforgiving, with a noose already tied at the end, professional-like. These men had done this before, knew exactly how to measure the drop, how to tie the knot so it would tighten slow instead of snap quick. They wanted him to suffer. Isaiah was forced to stand under that twisted oak while they looped the noose around his neck. The enslaved watched in chains, forced to witness, tears streaming down faces, prayers whispered in languages the Middle Passage had tried to drown but couldn't. Delilah sang low in Yoruba, calling on Un, the warrior god, on Shango, the thunder deity, on all the ancestors who'd crossed the water in chains and died without ever knowing freedom. Hannah's hands shook so hard the chains rattled. She wanted to rush forward to throw herself between Isaiah and death, but Moses grabbed her arm, held her back. Don't, he whispered fierce. Don't give Slade the satisfaction of hanging too. Massa, please, Esther called out, her pregnant belly huge now, voice desperate. He's a good man. He protected us. That's exactly why he's got to hang, Slade said, mounting his horse so he could watch from above. Can't have a leader among you. Can't have someone giving you ideas about dignity and resistance. Better to kill one and terrify the rest than let a spark turn into a fire. He nodded to Cutler. Do it. Cutler slapped the horse Isaiah was standing on. The animal lurched forward. Isaiah dropped. The rope went taut with a sound like a whip crack. But something went wrong, or maybe right, depending on how you see the hand of God in things. The rope didn't snap Isaiah's neck clean like it was supposed to. Instead, it pulled tight, choking him slow, his feet kicking in the air, hands clawing at the noose, body twisting and writhing in that terrible dance of death. Sweet Jesus. The sound he made were that strangled gasping, that desperate fight for air. It cut through the dawn like knives. 25 souls in chains screamed, wept, turned their faces away, but Slade forced them to watch. Eyes forward, all of you. This is what happens to rebels. Hannah couldn't look away. Her eyes locked on Isaiah's face, watching it turn purple, watching the veins bulge in his neck, watching the life drain out of him one agonizing second at a time. And in that moment, something crystallized in her soul. Pure cold hatred so strong it felt like ice burning through her veins. Then came the miracle, or maybe the curse, dependent on your faith. The rope snapped, not at the noose, but higher up where it had been tied to the branch. Old hemp rotted through with age and weather finally gave way under Isaiah's weight. He dropped hard, hitting the ground like a felled tree, the noose still tight around his neck but no longer connected to anything. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. The world hung suspended, shocked into silence. Then Slade roared, "Get him up! Tie it again!" But Isaiah was gasping, choking, alive. His massive chest heaved, drawing in air through his crushed windpipe. And his eyes, Lord of Glory. His eyes opened and looked straight at Hannah. In them she saw not defeat but defiance, not surrender, but strength. The ancestors had given him back, if only for a moment more. The rope broke. Delilah's voice rang out, powerful as a prophet's. The ancestors reject this death. The gods themselves say no. Shut your mouth, witch. Slay dismounted. Fury, twisting his face into something inhuman. He grabbed the whip from his belt. If the rope won't do it, I'll beat him to death myself. And he did. Lord have mercy. He tried. 20 lashes, 30, 40. The whip sang its terrible music song, cutting through the rags on Isaiah's back, opening old wounds and creating new ones, painting the red clay redder with blood. Isaiah didn't scream, couldn't scream, his throat too damaged from the noose, but his body convulsed with each strike, muscles seasoned, skin splitting open like ripe fruit. At 50 lashes, Moses broke his silence. Enough, you going to kill your own property? That's the point, Slade screamed, bringing the whip down again and again, lost in his own rage now, a demon possessed by cruelty. 60 lashes. 70. The whip was dripping red, Slade's arm tying. But still he continued. Hannah couldn't take it no more. She lunged forward despite the chains, throwing herself over Isaiah's body, her own back exposed to the whip. Stop! Stop! Please! He suffered enough! The whip caught her across the shoulders. Pain exploded like lightning, but she didn't move, didn't leave Isaiah's side. Another strike, another. She felt skin, music split, felt blood run hot down her back, but she stayed, covering him with her own body. "Hannah, no!" Delilah, music cried. But Hannah just pressed her face against Isaiah's bloody back and whispered in his ear, "Live, brother. Live so we can kill him together. Live." Finally, Cutler grabbed Slade's arm. "Boss, you keep this up, you'll destroy valuable music property. That woman too. Think about the profit. Profit." That word cut through Slade's rage like cold water. He stopped, breathing hard, looking down at Isaiah's destroyed back, at Hannah kneeling over him, at the blood pooling in the dirt. Music. His business mind reasserted itself over his cruelty, calculating losses. "Chain them both separately," he ordered. "No food for 3 days. They want to be martyrs. Let them suffer for it." They dragged Hannah off Isaiah's body, her own back burning with pain, and locked her in a separate collar away from the main chain. Isaiah was left where he lay, too broken to move, barely breathing. Music. More meat than man now, but alive. Sweet Jesus, still alive. That night, as the Coffle camped and the guards drank whiskey by the fire, Delilah crawled close to where Isaiah lay. She had herbs, roots, puces made in secret, and she worked on his wounds by moonlight, singing prayers so old they came from before the ships, before the chains, before America itself. Music existed. "The rope broke," she whispered. "That means something. The ancestors ain't done with you yet, warrior. Ain't done with any of us." Hannah, chained separate but close enough to see, watched through eyes swollen from her own beating. Her back screamed with every breath, but the pain was distant, unimportant. What mattered was that Isaiah's chest still rose and fell. What mattered was that they'd both survived. As dawn approached, Hannah reached into the bloody rags of her shift and pulled out something she'd found in the dirt beneath the hanging tree. One of Isaiah's teeth, knocked loose by the whip, still streaked with his blood. She clutched it tight in her fist. A relic, a promise, a reminder. This tooth would be her talisman, her reminder that death could be cheated, that even the devil's rope could break. That resistance lived as long as breath remained. Jonas watched from the main chain, his face haunted, realizing too late what his betrayal had bought. Not freedom, not mercy, just the knowledge that he'd helped torture the best man among them. And somewhere in the darkness, Hannah made a new promise. Isaiah's blood, her blood, little Jacob's grave, old Samuel's memory. All of it would be answered for. All of it would be paid in Slade's coin. 3 nights after the failed hanging, when the moon hung thin and pale like a ghost watching over the Georgia lands, Hannah discovered the crack in her chain. It happened by accident or maybe by providence, dependent on whether you believe the ancestors guide such things. She was shifting in her sleep, trying to find a position where her back didn't scream with pain from the weapon she'd taken, when her fingers brushed against the iron collar around her neck. And there, where the metal had been welded together by some long-dead blacksmith, she felt it a split no wider than a fingernail running along the seam. Her heart stopped, then started again, pounding like African drums. She didn't move, didn't dare breathe different. Just lay there in the darkness, feeling that crack with her fingertips, testing its depth, its width, wondering if it went all the way through or just part way. Around her, the others slept in their chains. Moses snoring soft, Delilah muttering prayers in her sleep, Pearl silent as a grave since her brother died. Cutler and Briggs stood guard by the fire, passing a whiskey bottle between them, rifles propped against a log. Slowly, careful as breathing, Hannah worked her fingers into the crack, felt the metal give just slightly. Not enough to break free, not yet, but enough to know that with time, with pressure, with the right moment, this collar could come off. She lay there until dawn, mind racing faster than her heart. If she told the others, if anyone knew, it could mean death for them all. But if she kept it secret, music stayed silent. Maybe, just maybe, she could use this when the time came. When the moment arrived to make Slade pay for every drop of blood he'd spilled, every child, music he'd let die, every soul he'd broken. When morning came and they prepared to march, Hannah caught Isaiah's eye. Music. The giant man could barely walk, his back a ruin of torn flesh and exposed muscle. But he'd survived the night. Delilah's herbs and prayers had kept the fever at bay, kept infection from taking root. He moved slow, each step of agony, but he moved. Hannah found a way to shuffle close to him as they lined up. "Brother," she whispered, voice so low only he could hear. "I got something to tell you. something important. Isaiah's eyes still holding that lightning despite the pain focused on her. He gave the smallest nod. My collar, she breathed. It's cracked. Mike could come off if I work it right. Isaiah's face didn't change, but she saw his pupils dilate, saw understanding flash across his features quick as a blink. He said nothing, just touched her hand for the briefest moment. A gesture that meant, I hear you, sister. I'm with you. What's the whispering back there? Briggs hollered, riding his horse closer. You all know the rules. They fell silent, started marching. 23 souls now, 4 dead since. Music Richmond, their graves scattered along that red clay road like markers of suffering. The sun climbed high and mean, turning the world into a furnace. And Hannah walked with that secret burning in her chest hotter than any heat. That night, camped by a creek where the water ran brown and slow, Hannah worked the crack in her collar, used a sharp stone she'd picked up on the road, scraped at the metal when the guards wasn't looking, widened the split bit, music by bit. Her neck bled from the effort, the iron cutting new wounds as she twisted and pulled, but she didn't stop. Delilah noticed. The old root woman saw everything, missed nothing. She crawled close under pretense of treating Hannah's whip wounds, her gnarled fingers pressing herbs into the torn flesh of Hannah's back. Child, she whispered. What you doing? Hannah hesitated, then showed her. Delilah's eyes went wide, then narrowed with understanding. She glanced around to music, make sure the guards wasn't watching, then leaned close, her breath smelling of root and mystery. The ancestors sent you this gift, Delilah said, but gifts come with responsibility. You use this wrong. We all pay. You use it right, she trailed off. Let the possibility hang in the air like smoke. I'm going to kill Slade, Hannah whispered. Soon as the time's right, alone if I have to. Delilah shook her head. No, we do this together or not at all. Me, you, Isaiah, Moses, maybe others. But we need a plan, can't just rush in wild. Slade's got guns, got dogs, got the law on his side. He also got arrogance, Moses added from nearby, keeping his voice low. He'd been listening. Thinks we too broken to fight back. That's his weakness. Over the next 2 days, as they marched deeper into Georgia, closing in on the Alabama border, the 4 of them, Hannah, Isaiah, Delilah, and Moses, began to plan in whispers and glances. They couldn't talk open, couldn't risk Jonas hearing and betraying them again. But they developed a language of looks and small gestures that said everything words couldn't. The plan was simple, brutal, necessary. Wait until they reached Augusta, music, where Slade planned to sell off some of the Coffle and buy new supplies. In the chaos of the town, with Slade distracted, Hannah would slip her collar, take one of the guards' knives, and end the devil's life. The others would scatter, run for the swamps and forests, take their chances with the paddy rollers and dogs, rather than face the cotton fields of Alabama. It wasn't a good plan. It probably wouldn't work, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. On the 11th night of marching, something happened that changed everything. Slade called Hannah to his tent. She went, heart hammering against her ribs, the crack in her collar hidden beneath a strip of cloth she'd tied around her neck. Cutler pushed her inside the canvas shelter where Slade sat on a camp stool, his ledger open on a makeshift table, whiskey glass in hand. Come here, gal, he said, voice smooth as snake oil. Hannah stepped forward, keeping her eyes down, playing the broken slave, even though fire raged in her soul. You got spirit, Slade said, studying her like she was a horse he was considering buying. Most women would have been crushed by now, but you still got that defiance in you. I can see it even when you try to hide it. He stood, walked around her in a circle, and Hannah felt her skin crawl. I've been thinking about Augusta, about the sales I'm going to make there, and I decided you ain't going to Alabama with the rest. I'm selling you separate. Hannah's blood went cold. Where? Plantation outside Augusta. Man named Whitmore runs a big operation. He pays premium for strong-willed women. Likes to break them himself. Make examples of them for the other slaves. Slade's smile was pure evil. 2 days, gal. 2 days and you'll never see these people again. Never see that big fool Isaiah. Never see the old witch Delilah. Just you and a new master who specializes in crushing spirits. He leaned close, whispered in her ear. I wanted you to know. Wanted you to spend these last 2 days thinking about it, fearing it, knowing there ain't no escape. Hannah said nothing, just stood there, rage and terror warrant in her chest, mind racing through possibilities. 2 days. She had 2 days to kill Slade. Break free or die trying. When Cutler dragged her back to the chain, she found Isaiah waiting, eyes full of questions. She shook her head slightly. Not now. Can't talk now. But he understood. They all understood. Time was running out. That night, while the guards drank and the others slept, Hannah worked her collar with desperate intensity. The crack widened, the metal groaned, her neck bled freely. But she didn't stop. Dawn was coming, and with it, the road to Augusta. She had maybe 36 hours before Slade sold her away from everyone she'd come to love, everyone who'd become family in these chains. Delilah crawled close, pressed something into Hannah's hand, a small cloth bag that smelled of grave dirt and sulfur. "Goofer dust," the old woman whispered. "You get a chance to use it on Slade. Put it in his food, his whiskey, music his boots. It'll bring the death curse down on him. The ancestors' music will do the rest. Will it work? Child, I've been working roots for 40 years. It'll work, but you gotta get close enough to use it." Hannah clutched the bag tight. 2 weapons now. The cracked collar that might let her slip free and the death curse in her palm. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had yesterday. Isaiah managed to get close enough to whisper, "Tomorrow night, when we camp outside Augusta, that's when we move. Can't wait no longer. My collar ain't loose enough yet." Music. "Then we make it loose enough. Whatever it takes, sister. We're running out of time." As the sun rose on their 12th day of marching, Hannah felt the weight of what was coming settle on her shoulders like an iron yoke. Tomorrow night, they'd either be free or dead. There was no middle ground, no mercy, no turning back. Slade rode past that music-black coat flap and devil's smile on his face. He looked down at Hannah and tipped his hat, mocking her with false courtesy. "Enjoy your last full day with your friends, gal. Come sunset tomorrow, you belong to Whitmore. And trust me, you're going to wish I'd kept you." The sickness came on silent feet, like death wearing soft shoes. It started with Thomas, a quiet field hand who'd barely spoke 10 words since Richmond. On the 13th morning of marching, he woke shaken so hard his chains rattled loud enough to wake the whole camp. His skin was hot as fire, eyes rolled back in his head, mouth frozen with words that made no sense. Delilah took one look at him, and her face went grave as a funeral. "Swamp fever," she said. "Malaria must have got bit by mosquitoes back at that creek we camped by 3 nights ago." "Will he live?" Moses asked. But the question was foolish. They all knew the answer. By noon, Thomas was dead. By sunset, 3 more was burning with fever. Sarah, Benjamin, and Ruth, the one who'd been chained near Jonas. They shook and sweated and cried out for water that did nothing to cool them. The fever ate at him from inside, turning their minds to mush, their bodies to kindling. Slade looked at the sick ones like they was spoiled meat. "We keep moving," he announced. "Sick or not, we got a schedule. Anyone who can't walk gets left." "Massa, please," Delilah called out, her root woman's voice strong despite her age. "They need rest, need medicine. I can treat them if you just give me time." "Time is money, old woman, and these 3 ain't worth the delay." He turned to Cutler. "Unlock them from the chain. Leave them by the roadside. If they live, they live. If not," he shrugged. But the fever wasn't done. Lord have mercy, it was just getting started. That night, 2 more fell sick. Dina, the woman Hannah had nursed with her own milk and died Samuel Jr. The next morning, 4 more showed symptoms. By the 4th day of the sickness, 11 souls out of the original 23 was either dead or dying. Their bodies left in shallow graves or no graves at all, just crumpled by the roadside for the buzzards. The remaining 12 walked like ghosts through a nightmare, wondering who'd be next. Which one of them would wake with that terrible heat burning through their blood? Hannah felt the fever brush past her like a shadow, but it didn't take hold. Neither did it claim Isaiah, Delilah, or Moses. Whether that was luck, providence, or the protection of ancestors, nobody could say. But the fever changed everything. Slade's carefully calculated profit was disappearing before his eyes. His ledger full of names that was now just corpses. His rage grew with each death. Music. His cruelty sharpening to a razor's edge. He pushed the survivors harder, gave him less food, less water, less rest, trying to make up for lost time and lost money. Move. His whip cracked constantly now, not just for punishment, but out of pure frustration. "I paid good money for you worthless creatures, and you're dying on me like flies." On the 17th day, when they was camped just 10 mi outside Augusta, the fever finally slowed its attack. Music 12 souls remained out of the original 27. 12 exhausted, half starved, Desperate people who'd watched their friends die one by one, who'd buried bodies with their bare hands, who'd seen hell and somehow lived through it. That night, Music Slade did something unexpected. He called Hannah to his tent again. She went, the crack in her collar now wide enough that she could feel it shift when she moved her neck. The goofer dust Delilah had given her was hidden in the waistband of her ragged shift, warm against her skin like a coal waiting to catch fire. Her heart hammered as Cutler pushed her through the tent flap. Slade sat, Music, at his makeshift table, his black coat off for once, shirt sleeves rolled up, face drawn with exhaustion and anger. The whiskey bottle beside him was half empty, and Music, his eyes had a dangerous glitter to him. "Sit," he ordered, pointing to the ground. Hannah sat, keeping her eyes down, her body tense as a spring. "You know medicine," Slade said. "Not a question, a statement. I've watched you, seen you treating the sick ones, using herbs and such. That old witch Delilah teaches you some massa. My grandmother taught me more back before. I don't care about your life story." He cut her off. "Here's the situation. I got half my cough dead from fever. The other half's probably carrying it. Music just waiting to show symptoms. If I lose any more, this whole trip becomes a financial disaster." He leaned forward, Music them winter steel eyes boring into her. "So, here's the deal. You keep the rest of them alive until we reach Augusta tomorrow, and I'll reconsider selling you to Whitmore. Might keep you with the group, send you to a easier plantation." Hannah's mind, Music raced. This was a chance. Maybe the only one she'd get. Not just to help the others, but to get close to Slade. Close enough to use the goofer dust. Close enough to what you need me to do, massa. Whatever it takes. Herbs, prayers, conjure, I don't care. Just keep him breathing until tomorrow. He pulled out his ledger, ran his finger down the dwindling list of names. "I got Whitmore expecting 8 healthy slaves. I can only deliver 6 now if I lose any more. You understand the math?" "Yes, sir." "Good." He stood, swayed slightly. The whiskey hitting him. "Cutler will unlock you from the chain for the night. You'll have freedom to move among the sick. Treat him however you see fit. But if you try to run," he pulled his pistol from his belt, laid it on the table. "I'll hunt you down myself and make sure you die screaming. Clear. Clear, massa. Now get out." "And Hannah." He grabbed her wrist as she stood, his grip tight enough to bruise. "This is your last chance to prove your worth more alive than as an example. Don't waste it." Cutler unlocked her collar. Sweet Jesus, the relief of that weight lifting off her neck and led her back to where the others was camped. Isaiah's eyes went wide when he saw her unchained, and she gave him the smallest nod. "I got a plan. Trust me." For the next 6 hours, Hannah worked like a woman possessed. She had Delilah teach her which roots to boil, which herbs to crush into puces. She treated wounds that had festered, brought down fevers with cool water from the creek, forced bitter teas down throats that didn't want to swallow. Moses helped her, strong enough to hold down the ones who thrashed in delirium. Pearl, silent since her brother died, found her voice again, helping comfort the suffering. But Hannah's mind was only partly on the healing. The other part was calculating, plotting, waiting for the right moment. That moment came near midnight. Slade emerged from his tent, stumbling drunk now, that whiskey bottle clutched in one hand. He walked over to where Hannah was treating. Esther, the pregnant woman, now so close to her time that her belly looked ready to split open. The baby inside her was the only new life in all this death. And somehow, against all odds, both mother and child had survived the fever. "How's my investment?" Slade slurred, looking down at Esther with eyes that held no humanity. "She's strong, massa," Hannah said, keeping her voice steady. "Baby strong, too. You'll get a good price for both in Augusta." Slade laughed. That nail-on coffin sound. 2 for the price of 1. Maybe this trip won't be a total loss after all. He swayed, caught himself on a tree trunk. "You did good tonight, gal. Real good. Maybe I will keep you after all. A slave who can keep other slaves alive is worth her weight and gold." He turned to walk back to his tent, and that's when Hannah saw it. The whiskey bottle dangling loose in his hand, almost slipping from his grip. Her chance. Maybe her only chance. She reached into her shift, felt the cloth bag of goofer dust warm against her fingers. Delilah had said, put it in his whiskey, his food, his boots, anywhere that touched him regular. The old root woman had sworn the death curse would follow, that the ancestors would claim him within days. But before Hannah could move, Slade stopped, turned back. His eyes, even drunk, was sharp as knives. "You got something in your hand, gal?" Hannah's blood went cold. "No, massa. Just music." Just herbs for Esther. He walked back closer now, them winter steel eyes searching her face. Show me! Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. If he saw the goofer dust, if he knew what she was planning, he'd kill her right here, right now, and probably take Isaiah and Delilah with her. I said, show me. Hannah's hand trembled as she pulled it from her shift. But what she showed him wasn't the goofer dust, it was Isaiah's tooth, the one she'd kept as a relic and promise. She'd switched him at the last second, hiding the dust deeper in her clothes. Slade, Music, looked at the bloody tooth, confused for a moment. Then his face darkened with rage. That's from the big one from when I whipped him. His hand shot out, grabbed her throat. You keeping tokens of rebellion, gal? Reminders of the ones who defied me? He squeezed, cutting off her air. Hannah clawed at his hands, vision going dark at the edges. Then a voice cut through the night. Massa Esther's baby coming. Come in now. Delilah's shout broke the moment. Slade released Hannah, who collapsed, gasping. He looked toward where Esther lay, saw her face twisted in music pain, heard her cries. Deal with it, he snarled at Hannah. And if that baby dies, you die with it. He stumbled back to his tent, taking his whiskey with him. The moment, the chance was, Music gone. Hannah knelt in the dirt, hand pressed to her bruised throat, the goofer dust still hidden, the tooth scattered in the grass. She'd been so close, so cursed close. But the night wasn't over yet. Esther's baby was coming, and with it, maybe one Music, last chance to end the devil's reign. Now listen here, child. What I'm about to tell you is the kind of truth that burns going down, the kind that makes you want to look away, but can't. Because this is where Hannah stopped being just a survivor and became something else entirely. This is where the fire in her chest finally found its release. Esther's baby came screaming into the world just before dawn, a tiny girl child with lungs strong as thunder and fists that punched at the air like she was already fighting. Hannah caught her, cut the cord with a sharp stone, cleaned her with water from the creek while Delilah sang prayers in Yoruba. The old root woman's voice carried across the camp. Waken those who'd managed to sleep, announcing that despite all the death and suffering, life had found a way. Slade emerged from his tent, hungover and mean, squinting against the risen sun. He looked at the baby at Esther, exhausted and bleeding, but alive. And a smile crept across his face. Not the devil's smile, but worse, the smile of a man calculating profit. 2 slaves for the price of 1, he said, echoing his words from the night before. Whitmore is going to pay premium for a nursing mother and infant. He looked at Hannah, still kneeling beside Esther. You did good, gal, real good. Consider yourself reprieved. You're staying with the Coffle after all. Hannah said nothing, just held that newborn baby, felt its warmth, its heartbeat, and thought about her own Ruth. Sold away at 11 months old. This child would face the same fate. Born into chains, sold like cattle, never knowing freedom. The injustice of it burned in her chest hotter than any fever. They marched that day, the last day before Augusta, and Hannah walked with her collar still off, still free to move among the others. Slade had forgotten to chain her again in his hangover haze, and neither Cutler nor Briggs seemed to notice. It was a small mercy, but mercy's was rare in hell. By afternoon, they camped in a grove of pine trees just 5 miles outside Augusta. The air smelled of resin and red clay, and you could hear the town in the distance, church bells ringing, dogs barking, the rumble of wagons on cobblestone streets. Tomorrow they'd reach the auction block again, where some would be sold, others kept for the journey deeper south into Alabama. That evening, as the sun bled red into purple, and the first stars appeared like witnesses in the sky, Slade called Hannah to his tent a 3rd time. She went. The goofer dust was still hidden in her shift, warm against her skin. Isaiah's eyes followed her, full of concern and rage, but she gave him a look that said, Stay back. Let me handle this. Moses tensed like he wanted to intervene, but Delilah put a hand on his arm, shaking her head. Inside the tent, Slade sat at his table. No whiskey this time, just cold water in a tin cup. His black coat hung on a post, his whip coiled beside it like a sleeping serpent. He looked up when she entered, gestured for her to come closer. Take off your shift, he said. Hannah's blood went cold. Massa, you heard me. I got a cut on my shoulder. Been festering for days. You're going to treat it. His smile was thin, dangerous. Clear his throat. Unless you'd rather I chain you back up and forget about that reprieve. Music. She knew what this was, knew it in her bones, in the way his eyes traveled over her body, in the tone of his voice. This wasn't about no shoulder wound, This was about power, about breaking her spirit one last time before Augusta, about reminding her that her body wasn't her own. Hannah's hands trembled as she reached for the hem of her shift. But as she did, her fingers brushed against the cloth bag of goofer dust hidden there. And in that moment, something shifted in her mind. A decision crystallized, hard and sharp as broken glass. If he wanted her close, she'd get close. Close enough to end this. She pulled the shift over her head, standing before him in nothing but the scars on her back and the rage in her heart. Slade's eyes traveled over her, hungry and music, cruel, and he walked around behind her to examine her whip wounds. "You heal fast," he said, running a finger along one of the scars. "Strong constitution. That's good. Means you'll last long in the fields." His hand moved lower, proprietarily, and Hannah felt bile rise in her throat. But she didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there waiting, calculating, her mind sharp as a knife's edge. "Turn around," he ordered. She turned, saw him unbuckling his belt, saw the music intent clear on his face, and that's when she saw it too. His personal knife, music laying on the table within arm's reach, the one he used to cut tobacco to clean under his nails to threaten slaves when the whip wasn't enough. "Come here," he said, reaching for her. Hannah moved forward. Let him put his hands on her. Let him pull her close, his breath hot and whiskey stale against her neck. And as he did, her hand shot out, grabbed that knife faster than a snake strike. The blade flashed in the lantern light. Slade's eyes went wide, too late, registering the danger. Hannah brought the knife up and across in one smooth motion, cutting music, a deep X across his face, cheek to forehead, temple to jaw, blood sprayed hot and red, and Slade screamed, staggering back, hands flying to his ruined face. "You bitch!" Hannah didn't stop, didn't think, just moved on pure instinct and rage. She lunged forward, drove the knife toward his throat, but he twisted at the last second, and music. The blade caught his shoulder instead, sinking deep into muscle. He grabbed her wrist, squeezing until bones ground together, and she dropped the knife. They fell, crashing into the table, sending the lantern flying. It hit the ground and oil spilled, catching fire immediate-like. Flames spreading across the tent floor. Slade's hands found her throat squeezing, cutting off her air, and Hannah clawed at his face, digging her nails into the X she'd carved, making him scream again. "I'll kill you," he roared. "I'll skin you alive." But Hannah's hand found the goofer dust in her discarded shift. She grabbed the cloth bag, tore it open, and threw the contents directly into Slade's bloody face. Grave dirt, sulfur, salt, crushed bones, all of it mixing with his blood, getting into his wounds, his eyes, his mouth. "You cursed!" she screamed back at him, voice raw with rage. "The ancestors claim you. The dead rise against you. Your days are numbered, devil." Slade released her, stumbling back, clawing at his face, trying to wipe the goofer dust away. But it was too late. The curse was set. The death magic activated. The covenant between Hannah and the ancestors sealed in his blood. The tent was fully aflame now, smoke thick and black. Hannah grabbed her shift, pulled it on, and ran out into the night just as Cutler and Briggs came running. Fire! The boss's tent is burning. The whole camp erupted into chaos. Slaves scattered, guards shouted, and Slade emerged from the burning tent like a demon from hell. Face carved with an X, blood and goofer dust mixed into a grotesque mask, shoulder bleeding freely, eyes wild with pain and fury. "That woman," he pointed at Hannah with a shaken hand. "She attacked me. She's dead. You hear me? Dead." Cutler and Briggs raised their rifles and Hannah ran into the darkness between the pine trees, ran with no chains to hold her back, ran like her life depended on it, which it did. Behind her, shots rang out, bullets whizzing past her head, clipping branches, sending bark flying. She made it maybe 50 yards before Briggs tackled her from behind, bringing her down hard into the pine needles. His rifle butt came down once, twice, splitting her lip, breaking something in her face. Pain exploded like lightning, but Hannah didn't stop fighting. She kicked, bit, scratched, fought like a woman possessed. More guards came, 4 men to hold down one woman. They dragged her back to camp, threw her at Slade's feet. The devil stood there, fire raging behind him, his tent reduced to ashes, his face a ruin, his shoulders still bleeding. But when Hannah looked up at him through her swollen eyes, when she saw that X she'd carved into his flesh, when she saw the goofer dust ground into his wounds. Music, she smiled. Blood ran from her broken mouth, but she smiled. "You're going to die screaming, Massa," she said. "The curse is on you now. Can't wash it off. Can't pray it away. The ancestors coming for you, and they ain't gentle." Slade kicked her in the ribs hard enough to crack bone once, music twice, 3 times. Hannah curled into a ball, protecting her vital organs, but she kept that smile on her bloody face. "Chain her," Slade ordered, his voice ragged with pain. "Double chains, neck, wrists, ankles, and tomorrow, before we reach Augusta, I'm going to make an example of her that'll be remembered for generations." They chained her. Heavy iron, locked tight, no chance of escape this time. They threw her back with the others, and Isaiah immediately crawled to her side, his massive hands gentle as he assessed her injuries. "Sister, what did you do? What needed doing?" Hannah whispered through broken teeth. "I marked him, cursed him. He's a dead man walking now." Delilah pressed close, saw the blood on Hannah's shift, saw the empty cloth bag that had held the gopher dust. The old root woman's eyes went wide, then filled with something like pride. "The ancestors heard you, child. They witnessed that man going to suffer before he dies, going to know fear for the first time in music, his cruel life." The whole camp saw what Hannah had done, saw the music X carved into Slade's face, still bleeding, still burning with the gopher dust worked deep into the wound, saw the devil himself stagger and shake, saw him weak for the first time since Richmond, and in that moment, despite the chains, music, despite the beaten, despite the death sentence hanging over her head, Hannah felt something she hadn't felt in years: power. The fire from Slade's tent burned all night, cast an orange light across the camp like hell itself had opened up. And in that light, with her face swollen and bloody, her ribs cracked, her body, music, broken, but her spirit burning brighter than ever, Hannah whispered to those who could hear, "Tomorrow he tries to break me." Music. "But I already broke him. And when I die knowing I hurt the devil himself. That's more than most slaves ever get." Across the camp, Slade sat alone, trying to clean the gopher dust from his wounds, but it wouldn't come out. It had worked itself in too deep, mixing with his blood, carrying the death curse into his very bones. And for the first time in his cruel life, the devil himself knew what it felt like to be afraid. The night after Hannah marked Slade, something shifted in the air. You could feel it thick as fog rolling off a swamp, heavy as chains, but different. The ancestors was stirring, child. They was waking up. Slade's face had swollen something terrible. That X carved deep and festering with the gopher dust worked into his flesh. No amount of washing could get it out. And by nightfall his skin had gone hot with infection, his eyes feverish and wild. He sat by the fire drinking whiskey straight from the bottle, muttering to himself, one hand pressed to his ruined face, while the other clutched his pistol like it could protect him from curses. The 12 remaining souls, all that was left of the original 27, sat in their chains watching him. Hannah lay among them, her face swollen from the beaten, ribs cracked and screaming with every breath. But her eyes was clear, burning clear. She'd done what needed doing, and whatever came next, she'd face it knowing she'd hurt the devil himself. Isaiah sat close to her, his massive presence a comfort. Moses was on her other side and Delilah across from them, the old root woman's eyes gleaming in the firelight with knowledge older than America itself. Even Pearl had crawled close, finding strength in their circle, drawing courage from Hannah's defiance. "Tonight," Delilah whispered, voice so low only they could hear. "Tonight we call the ancestors properly. Tonight we finish what you started, Hannah." "How?" Moses asked. "Slade's watching us closer than ever. Cutler and Briggs got their rifles ready." "Don't matter," the old woman said. "The dead don't need permission from the living. They just need invitation." She looked at each of them in turn. "Y'all trust me?" They nodded. What choice did they have? They was 12 people chained together, facing sail in Augusta tomorrow, facing the cotton fields of Alabama after that. If the ancestors could help, if the old gods could intervene, then they'd take that chance. "Isaiah," Delilah said, "you remember that song your father taught you, the one from before the ships, before the chains?" The giant man's eyes lit with understanding. The call-in song, the one that summons the warriors, that's the one. When I give the sign, you sing it loud. Music. Don't matter if Slade hears. Don't matter if he brings the whip. You sing it like your life depends on it. Music. 'Cause all our lives do. The night deepened. The guards changed shifts. Cutler going to sleep in the supply wagon while Briggs took first watch, his rifle across his lap, eyes already droopy with exhaustion. Slade remained by the fire, but the fever from his infected wounds was taken hold. He swayed where he sat, muttering words that made no sense, seeing things in the flames that wasn't there. That's when Delilah began. She started with a hum, low and resonant, a sound that came from deep in her chest and seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. The others felt it before they heard it, a trembling in the earth like the world was waking up after a long sleep. Her hands moved in patterns over the dirt, drawn symbols that looked like letters but wasn't from no alphabet the white man knew. "These marks," she whispered. "Music is the language of Legba, the opener of ways, the one who stands at the crossroads between the living, music, and the dead. I'm asking him to open the door tonight to let our people through." Hannah watched, fascinated and terrified. She'd heard about conjure work all her life, seen Delilah do small workings, healing herbs, protection charms, but nothing like this. This was big magic, dangerous magic, the kind that changed things permanent-like. The symbols were complete. Delilah looked at Isaiah and nodded. The giant man took a deep breath and then he sang. "Un, warrior of iron, hear your children's cry. Shango, music lord of thunder, strike down our enemies. Oya, mother of storms, sweep away, music the wicked. Ancestors who cross the water, come now, come quick." His voice rolled out across the night like thunder, deep and powerful, filling the darkness with sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The words was Yoruba mixed with English, old tongue twisted with new, a prayer and a summons and a promise all at once. Briggs jerked awake, raised his rifle. "Quiet," Slade said. "No singing." But Isaiah didn't stop. If anything, he sang louder, and others joined in. Hannah, despite her broken ribs, Moses Pearl, finding her voice again after weeks of silence. Even timid Esther holding her newborn baby close and humming along. "I said shut up!" Briggs fired his rifle into the air, the shot cracking through the night like a whip. Slade staggered to his feet, face twisted in pain and rage. "Stop that singing or I'll—" He stopped mid-sentence, stumbled, put his hand to his head. "You hear that?" he whispered. "Hear what, boss?" Briggs asked. The drums. You don't hear the drums." But there wasn't no drums, not that the guards could hear anyway. But Hannah heard him, Lord of Glory. They all heard him, a deep rhythmic pounding that seemed to come from inside the earth itself. From the graves of every enslaved person who died on this cursed road. From the bellies of the ships that had crossed the Middle Passage. From Africa herself calling out to her stolen children. The fire flared suddenly, shooting up 10 feet high, and in the flames, Hannah saw faces. Old Samuel, who'd died on the road, little Jacob, who'd frozen in the storm, Thomas and Sarah and Benjamin and all the others who'd fallen to fever. They was there in the flames, watching, waiting, ready. "They came," Delilah said, tears streaming down her ancient face. "The ancestors came." Isaiah's collar, the one that had been locked tight since Richmond, suddenly clicked open. Just like that, no key, no explanation. It fell to the ground with a heavy thud and the giant man's eyes went wide with shock. Then Moses's collar opened, then Pearl's, then Esther's. One by one, the iron collars that had bound them for 3 weeks fell away, hitting the ground like rain, leaving only Hannah's. The double chain Slade had put on her after she attacked him. What the hell? Slade backed away from the fire, pistol shaken in his hand. What kind of witchcraft? The ground beneath his feet cracked. Just a small fissure at first, but it spread quick, spidering out like veins, and from those cracks came a smell. Grave dirt, rot, the stench of death that wouldn't stay buried. Slade looked down, saw the earth opening beneath him, and screamed, "Get away from me, all of you! Get back!" He fired his pistol wildly, shots going everywhere and nowhere. Briggs ran pure fear in his eyes, dropping his rifle and disappearing into the darkness. Cutler, wakened from his sleep, took one look at what was happening and did the same. Ran like the devil himself was after him, which maybe he was. That's when Hannah's collar finally broke. Not from no key, not from no magic visible to the eye, but from the sheer force of her will combined with the ancestors' power. The metal just shattered, fell away in pieces, leaving her neck raw and bleeding, but free. She stood, her body screaming with pain from broken ribs and bruises. But she stood, and as she did, the others gathered around her. Isaiah, Moses, Delilah, Pearl, Esther holding her baby. All of them free of their chains. All of them facing Slade together. "You cursed me," Slade whispered, backing away, that X on his face gleaming wet in the firelight. "You cursed me and now they coming for me." "Not yet," Hannah said, her voice rough but strong. "Not yet, devil." First you're going to pay for what you done, then they can have you. The fire roared higher, and in its light the shadows of the dead danced. 27 souls had started this journey from Richmond. 15 had died along the way. And tonight those 15 was here bearing witness, demanding justice. Music. Slade ran, dropped his pistol, and ran into the forest like an animal, crashing through brush, his screams echoing back to them. The 12 survivors didn't follow. Not yet. They stood in a circle around the fire, holding hands, singing the old songs, thanking the ancestors for their intervention. "We free now," Moses said, wondering his voice. "We actually free." "Not yet," Hannah repeated, her hand going to her neck where the collar had been. "Not until we decide what to do with him. Not until we finish this." Isaiah nodded. "He's out there wounded and scared. We could just leave him. Let him die slow from that infection, from the curse." "Or," Hannah said, and her eyes held a fire fiercer than any conjure work, "we could make sure he don't hurt nobody else ever." Delilah smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "The ancestors brought us this far. They want music justice, real justice, the kind that's written in blood." They looked at each other, these 12 survivors, and in that moment, they made a choice. They wasn't going to run yet, wasn't going to scatter to the woods and swamps and take their chances alone. First, they music was going to hunt the hunter. They was going to find Slade in them dark woods, and they was going to show him what happens when the enslaved rise up with the ancestors' music at their backs. Dawn broke gray and cold over the Georgia woods, and with it came the sound that every runaway slave feared most, the baying of hounds. They wasn't Slade's dogs. He'd lost his own 2 bloodhounds to fever a week back. No, these was plantation dogs from Augusta, brought by Patty Rollers who'd heard the shots in the night, seen the smoke from the burning tent, smelled the chaos on the wind. 20 men on horseback, maybe more, music with a pack of hounds trained to hunt human flesh. The 12 survivors, still free of their chains, still carrying the ancestors' blessing from the night before, heard them coming from a mile away. That terrible sound, like hell itself, had opened its mouth and started howling. "We got to move," Moses said, his field hand's instincts sharp as ever. "Move now!" But Hannah stood still, looking toward where Slade had run into the forest. They tracked him through the night, following his blood trail. The X on his face was infected something terrible now, weeping pus and poison, and he'd been leaving drops like a wounded animal. They'd been so close to finding him, so close to finishing what she'd started. "We can't just leave," she said. "Not without, we can and we will." Isaiah's deep voice cut through. He put his massive hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "Sister, I know you want justice. We all do, but them dogs going to be on us in minutes. We stay here. We all die, every one of us." Hannah's jaw clenched, her fists shook with rage. After everything, the march, the deaths, the suffering, marking Slade's face with that X. To run now felt like surrender, but then she looked at the others. Pearl barely holding herself together. Esther with her newborn baby clutched to her chest. Dela, old and strong, but not strong enough to outrun horses and dogs. "The swamp," Delilah said suddenly, her root woman's wisdom cutting through. "We head for the swampland south of here. Dogs can't track through water, horses can't follow through mud. It's our only chance." "That's 2 minimum," Moses said. "Can we make it before?" The howling got louder, closer. You could hear the thunder of hooves now, the shouting of men drunk on the power of the hunt. "We split up," Hannah decided, her mind moving fast. "Isaiah, you take Esther and the baby Pearl and the others who can move quick. Head southeast toward that creek we crossed yesterday. Follow it to the swamp. Me, Moses, and Delilah will lead the dogs north, away from you. Buy you time." "No," Isaiah said flat. "We stay together or there ain't time to argue." Hannah's voice cracked like a whip. "You know I'm right. They want me most. I'm the one who cut Slade. You get the others to safety. And when the chase is done, we meet at the swamp's edge, if we don't make it." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Isaiah's eyes held storm clouds, but he nodded. He knew she was right. Knew that 12 people moving together would be caught within the hour. But 2 groups splitting might give some of them a chance. "Be careful, sister," he said. And there was weight in them words. Love, respect, the bond forged in chains and blood. "You 2, brother," they split. 7 souls ran southeast. Isaiah's group moving fast and desperate. 5 ran north. Hannah, Moses, Delilah, and two others, a man named Caleb who'd survived the fever, and a woman named Miriam, who was stronger than she looked. The dogs found their trail within minutes. The sound of them baying changed, got higher, more excited. They'd caught the scent. You could hear them crashing through the underbrush. Music, powerful bodies eaten up ground, jaws slavering for the taste of runaways. Behind them came the horses and the riders carrying rifles and whips and the full weight of the law that said black folk wasn't human, was just property to be recovered or destroyed. Music. Hannah's group ran like their lives depended on it, which they did. Through thick forest where branches grabbed at clothes and roots tried to trip feet. Through clearance where the morning sun beat down already hot. Over streams where they didn't stop to drink, just splashed through and kept moving. Lungs burning, hearts hammering. Delilah started to fall behind. The old woman was strong in spirit, but her body was 70 years. Music old, worn down by a lifetime of slavery and the hard march from Richmond. Her breath came in gasps. Her steps got slower, and finally she stumbled, went down hard. "Leave me," she said when Music Moses tried to help her up. "I'm slowing you down. You go on, not a chance," Hannah said fierce. She and Moses each took one of Delilah's arms, half carried her forward. Behind them, the dogs was getting closer. You could hear individual barks now. Could hear the men shouting, "There, I see tracks, fresh ones." Caleb looked back, face gray with terror. "They going to catch us, sweet Jesus. They going to catch us all. Then some of us fight while others run," Moses said, and there was steel in his voice. He'd been a rebel on his plantation. Music had scars from past beatings that told stories of resistance. "Hannah, you and Delilah, keep going. Me and Caleb will hold him here." "Moses, go!" He grabbed a fallen branch thick as a man's arm, tested, Music, its weight. "We didn't come this far to all die together. Some of us got to make it. Tell our story. Make sure the world knows what happened on this road." There wasn't time to argue. The first dog burst through the trees, a massive bloodhound with foam on its jaws and murder in its eyes. It launched itself at Caleb and the man went down screaming, the dog's teeth tearing into his arm. Moses swung his branch, caught another dog mid-leap, sent it rolling, but there was too many. 10 dogs, 15, a whole pack trained to kill. They swarmed Caleb first and his screams cut off sudden-like, replaced by the terrible sound of tearing flesh. Moses fought like a demon, his branch swinging, connecting with skulls and ribs. But a dog got his leg, pulled him down, and then they was on him too. Hannah wanted to help, wanted to fight, but Miriam grabbed her arm and pulled her away. He chose this. Don't make it for nothing. They ran. Hannah and Miriam dragged Delilah between them. Moses' screams chasing them through the trees until they stopped. Sudden and final. The dogs had made their kill, but it had bought precious minutes. The 3 women reached a ravine steep and treacherous with a creek at the bottom. No time to think, no time to plan. They just jumped. Music slid down the muddy bank, hit the water hard. The creek was cold and fast, pulling at their legs, trying to sweep them downstream. "Follow the water," Delilah gasped. "It'll take us to the swamp. Dogs can't track us in water." They waded downstream. Water up to their chests, feet slipping on rocks, current fighting them every step. Behind them, the dogs reached the ravine's edge, confused now, casting about for the scent. The riders appeared, cussing and shouting, deciding whether to follow into the water or circle around. Then came a sound that stopped everything. A rifle shot, loud and final, and a man's voice, young and panicked. "I got one, boss. I got one of them." Hannah's heart dropped into her stomach. She looked back, saw Miriam floating face down in the creek, a bloom of red spreading around her body. The woman had taken a shot in the back of the head, died instantic, her body already being carried downstream by the current. "Keep moving," Delilah hissed. "She's gone. Keep moving or we all gone." They moved. 2 women now instead of 3, wading through that cold water, while behind them the hunt continued. More shots rang out, bullets kicking up spray around them, but the shooters was firing from horseback at moving targets in water. Most of the shots went wild, the creek widened, got deeper, turned into something more like a river, and then, blessed mercy, they saw it. The swampland stretching out dark and mysterious, covered in cypress trees with Spanish moss hanging like the beards of prophets. Water black as midnight and deep as secrets. They plunged into the swamp, wading through water that came up to their necks, pushing through lily pads and cattails, moving into that green darkness where the dogs couldn't follow, where the horses couldn't go, where white men feared to tread because the swamp belonged to runaways and spirits and things that didn't answer to no master. Behind them, the paddy rollers stopped at the swamp's edge. The lead rider, a hard-faced man with a tubbock-and beard, sat his horse and stared into the darkness where Hannah and Delilah had disappeared. "Let him go," he said. "Swamp will kill him soon enough. If not, the gators will. Either way, they ain't our problem no more." But his lieutenant wasn't satisfied. "What about the others, the ones who went southeast? We keep 7 dogs on their trail. Find them by sundown or give up. Master Whitmore wants his property back, but he ain't paying us to die in no swamp." Deep in the swamp, Hannah and Delilah found a cypress tree with roots thick enough to hide behind. They collapsed against it, breathing hard, soaked through, exhausted beyond words. Hannah's broken ribs screamed with every breath. Delilah's old body shook with cold and fatigue. "We made it," the old woman whispered. "Music. By the grace of the ancestors, we made it." But Hannah wasn't celebrating. Her mind was on the others. Isaiah's group running toward this same swamp from a different direction, with 7 dogs on their trail, Caleb and Moses torn apart by hounds, Miriam floating dead in the creek, and Slade still out there somewhere, wounded and cursed, but alive. "We rest for an hour, Hannah," Music said. "Then we find the others." And after that, her hand went to her neck, touched the raw skin where the collar had been. "After that, we finish what we started." Delilah looked at her with eyes that had seen 7 decades of suffering and survival. "You still thinking about him? About Slade?" "Every second," Hannah said. "That devil took everything from me. My babies, my music dignity, my blood. He's Mark now. I made sure of that. But Markin ain't enough. I want him dead. I want him to know before he dies that it was us who brought him down. That the ones he thought was property rose up and destroyed him. The curse will kill him eventually, Delilah," Music said. "The goofer dust in his wounds, the infection, eventually ain't soon enough." They sat in silence listening to the swamp sounds, frogs croaking, birds calling, water lapping against roots. Somewhere out there, Isaiah and the others was running for their lives. Somewhere out there, Slade was dying slow from the curse. And somewhere out there, the ancestors was watching, waiting to see how this story would end. Hannah touched her neck again, felt the freedom in her pulse, and made one more promise. She'd find Isaiah's group. She'd make sure they were safe, and then curse or no curse, dogs or no dogs. She'd hunt Slade down and finish what the ancestors had started. 3 days they hid in that swamp, Hannah and Delilah living like ghosts among the cypress trees and black water. They drank from the creek, ate cattail roots and whatever else the old root woman said was safe, slept in the hollow of a dead oak where snakes and gators couldn't reach. And every night Hannah dreamed of Slade. Saw that X on his face. Saw him stumble through the forest alone, fevered and cursed, calling out for help that never came. On the 4th day, Isaiah found them. The giant man emerged from the green darkness like a spirit himself, Pearl and Esther with her baby following close behind. 4 others had made it too, survivors of the dog chase, half-starved and exhausted, but alive. They collapsed together in that hollow oak, holding each other, weeping with relief that they wasn't alone no more. "Moses?" Hannah asked, though she already knew. Isaiah shook his head. "Gone. Him and Caleb bought us time with their lives. The dogs." He didn't finish, didn't need to. They was 9 now, 9 out of 27 who'd started the march from Richmond. 18 dead along that cursed road, their graves unmarked, their names remembered only by those who'd walked beside them in chains. That night, sitting around a small fire deep in the swamp where no paddy roller would venture, they told their stories. Pearl finally spoke about little Jacob, her voice broken but strong. Esther nursed her baby and sang soft spirituals. Isaiah showed them his back, the ruin of scars on top of scars, and said each mark was a memory he'd carry forever. And Hannah told them about Slade, about the ledger he'd kept, the one where he'd written all their names and prices like they was livestock, about how she'd seen it fall from Cutler's saddlebag that night she buried old Samuel. "I took it," she said quietly. "Hid it in my shift all this time. Even through the beatings, even when Slade called me to his tent, I kept it hidden." She reached into her ragged clothes and pulled out the leather-bound book, water-stained and blood-stained but still intact. They all stared at it like it was a live snake. "That book is evil," Pearl whispered. "It's got our souls written in it." "Not our souls," Hannah corrected. "Just his lies, his version of what we worth." "But I'm going to burn it," Going to burn every page, every name, every dollar amount he put beside our humanity. When? Isaiah asked. After I find him. Hannah's eyes held that fire again, that rage that 3 weeks of marching and suffering couldn't put out. I need to know where he is. Need to see him one more time before he dies from that curse. Delilah, who'd been quiet up till now, spoke. The ancestors showed me in a dream last night. He's still out there, maybe a day's walk north of here, holed up in an abandoned cabin near the old Augusta Road. Music. The infection's spread. The fever's got him bad, but he ain't dead yet. Stubborn devil won't die easy. Then I'm going, Hannah said. Simple as that. Not alone, Isaiah said. I'm coming with you. So am I, Delilah added. This is root work that needs finishing. I started the curse. I'm going to see it through. The others wanted to come too, but Hannah shook her head. You got a baby to protect, she told Esther. You got grief that needs healing, she told Pearl. Music. Y'all stay here. Stay safe. We'll be back by tomorrow night. And if we ain't, she didn't finish that thought neither. They left at dawn. 3 souls moving through the swamp like shadows. Hannah carried nothing but the ledger and her rage. Isaiah carried his strength and his memories. Delilah carried her knowledge of roots and the power of the ancestors walking beside her. By midday, they'd reached the edge of the swamp where solid ground began again, and there, like Delilah had said, was the old Augusta Road, that same red clay path they'd marched on in chains just days before. It looked different now, knowing they was free to walk it or not walk it, knowing no collar bound their necks, no master drove them forward. They followed it north, careful-like, staying in the tree line in case paddy rollers rode past. At mile marker 799, just 1 kilometer short of Augusta itself, they found what they was looking for. The cabin sat back from the road, half collapsed and forgotten, its roof sagging, its walls covered in vines. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and weak, and through the broken window, they could see movement inside. He's in there, Hannah whispered, her heart beating like African drums. That devil's in there. They approached slow, silent as death itself. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and through it they could hear sounds, rough breathing, moaning, the rattle of a man fighting fever and losing. Hannah pushed the door open. Inside, the cabin was dark and stinking of rot, and there, lying on a pile of moldy straw, was Slade. Lord have mercy. The curse had eaten him alive. That X on his face had turned black, the flesh around it necrotized and dying, one eye swollen shut, the other glazed, music with fever. His shoulder wound where Hannah had stabbed him was gangrenous, green, and weeping poison. His black coat lay across him like a death shroud, and his breathing came in short, wet gasps. He looked up when they entered, and what was left of his good eye focused on Hannah. Recognition flickered, then fear. You, he croaked. You did this. You cursed me. I marked you. Hannah corrected, stepping closer. The ancestors did the rest. She pulled out the ledger, held it up so he could see. You remember this? Your book of souls, your record of property bought and sold. Slade tried to speak, but only managed a wet cough that brought up blood. 27 names in this book, Hannah continued, her voice steady as stone. 27 people you marched 800 kilometers in chains. 18 of them died along the way. Old Samuel, little Jacob, Moses, Caleb. All of them got entries in your ledger, got prices written next to their humanity. She opened the book, started reading aloud. Samuel, age 70, purchased $300. Deceased mile marker 18. She tore out the page, held it up. This one's for him. She walked to the cabin's fireplace where a weak flame still burned and fed Samuel's page to the fire. It caught quick. Curlin and blackening turn into ash. Jacob, age 8, purchased $400. Deceased day 5. She tore out another page, burned it. This one's for the child who froze to death while you slept warm in your tent. Page by page, she burned them. Read each name, each price, each cold notation of death, and fed it to the flames. Isaiah and Delilah stood behind her, witnessing while Slade lay helpless and dying, forced to watch his life's work turn to ash. Thomas, Benjamin, Sarah, Ruth, Dina, all dead from fever you refused to treat. Burn. Moses and Caleb, torn apart by dogs while you sent men to hunt us down. Burn. Miriam, shot in the back while trying to escape the hell you created. Burn. When she got to her own page, she stopped, stared at it for a long moment. Hannah, age 28, 3 live births, purchased $1,000, property of William Slade, bound for Alabama cotton fields. She looked at Slade and her voice went cold as winter. But you don't own me no more, devil. You don't own nobody, not in this life and not in whatever hell you're headed to. She burned her own page, watched it curl and blacken and disappear. Then she burned the rest. Every page, every name, every lie he'd written about human souls being worth dollars and cents. The fire grew hotter, brighter, filling the cabin with light and smoke, and when the last page was ash, Hannah closed the empty leather cover and dropped it at Slade's feet. "You're going to die alone," she said. "No one to bury you, no one to mourn you, no one to remember your name except as a curse. The ancestors are waiting for you, devil, and they ain't gentle." Slade's mouth worked, trying to form words. Finally, one came out, barely a whisper. "Diaba, devil woman." That's Clear's throat, what he called her with his last bit of strength. Hannah smiled cold and fierce. No, just a mother, just a woman, just a human being who refused to stay broken. She turned to leave, then looked back one last time. Die slow, massa. Die knowing we won. They left him there, walked out of that cabin, into the afternoon sun. Behind them, Slade's rattling breath continued for music, maybe another hour, then it stopped. The devil finally died alone in that forgotten cabin at mile marker 799. Music. His ledger burned, his curse complete, his cruelty answered, and Hannah walked away with ashes on her hands and freedom in her heart, 1 kilometer from where the march should have ended, but music exactly where her new life began. Now, child, I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened next. Sometimes justice don't come from a judge's bench or a jury's verdict. Sometimes it comes from the hands of the suffering themselves, written in blood and iron, sanctioned by ancestors who know what the law never will. That some debts can only be paid one way. They didn't leave that cabin right away. Hannah and Isaiah and Delilah. They stood outside in the afternoon sun, listening to Slade's rattling breath through the broken window, and something shifted in the air, heavy, expectant, like the moment before thunder cracks. "He's still breathing," Hannah said quiet. "Barely," Delilah answered. "The curse is finishing him. Give it an hour, maybe 2. "No," Hannah's voice was hard as iron. "That's too easy, too peaceful. He don't deserve peaceful." She turned and walked back into the music cabin. Isaiah and Delilah exchanged a look, then followed. Inside, Music's slate had gotten worse just in them few minutes. His breath came in wet gasps, blood bubbling at the corners of his mouth. That X on his face a ruin of black flesh and corruption. But his one good eye still had awareness in it, still knew who they was, still understood what was happening. Hannah knelt beside him, her face inches from his. "You still with us, devil? Still conscious enough to understand?" Slade's eye tracked her movements. Yes, he understood. Good. She stood, looked around the cabin. In the corner, partially hidden under moldy straw, she saw it. The chain. Not just any chain, but the chain. The one that had bound the Coffle together from Richmond. Slade must have brought it here, maybe thinking to use it again once he recovered, never knowing he wouldn't recover at all. Hannah picked it, music up, felt its weight. 27 souls had worn this iron. 27 necks had been rubbed raw by these collars. Moses' blood was on it. Little Jacob's tears had rusted it. Her own flesh had been torn by it night after night for 3 weeks. Now it would serve a different purpose. She dragged the chain over to where Slade lay. He tried to speak, tried to protest, but only managed that wet, gurgling sound. "Isaiah," she said, "help me lift him." The giant man understood immediately. He grabbed Slade under the arms, careful to avoid the gangrenous shoulder wound, and pulled him to sit in position. Slade was weak as a baby, couldn't resist, couldn't fight back, could only watch with growing terror as Hannah approached with the chain. "You put this collar on me in Richmond," Hannah said, her voice biblical in its pronouncement. "Locked it around my neck so tight I bled, made me walk 800 kilometers feeling that iron bite into my flesh with every step." She wrapped the chain around Slade's neck, not gentle, not careful, just wrapped it once, twice, 3 times. The iron collar end fitted snug against his throat. 27 people wore this chain, she continued. 18 of them died. Every link carries their memory, their pain, their blood. You feel it now? Feel how heavy it is when you're the one wearing it. Slade's good eye went wide. He tried to grab at the chain with hands too weak to lift, tried to pull it away, but he had no strength left. The fever and curse had taken everything. Hannah pulled the chain tighter. Not enough to choke him yet, just enough to make him feel it, make him understand. This is for old Samuel, who you left to die on the road. She pulled it a bit tighter. Slade gasped, his airway narrowing. This is for little Jacob, who froze to death in the rain while you stayed dry in your tent. Tighter still. This is for Moses and Caleb, who got torn apart by dogs so the rest of us could live. Tighter. This is for every mother you separated from her babies, every child you sold, every soul you broke. Tighter. Slade was struggling now, but weak. So weak. His hands scrabbled at the chain, his legs kicked feebly, his breath came in short, desperate wheezes. The X on his face seemed to pulse black and evil, and from his throat came sounds that wasn't quite human no more. Hannah's face was stone. No tears, no rage, just cold determination. She kept pulling, kept tightening, and the chain that had bound 27 souls now became the instrument of one man's judgment. Isaiah watched, silent. He'd earned the right to witness music this, earned it through 70 lashes and a near hanging, through singing songs that kept them human when the world tried to make them music beasts. Delilah watched too, her lips moving in prayer, not for Slade's soul, but for Hannah's hop in this act of vengeance wouldn't poison her the way slavery had tried to poison them all. Slade's good eye locked on Hannah's face. In them final moments, what did he see? Did he see the woman whose babies he'd sold? Music. Did he see all the mothers and fathers and children he'd destroyed? Did he finally understand that every action has its reckoning, every cruelty its consequence? His mouth worked, trying to form words. Only one came out broken and choked. Mine, mother. In his delirium, in his dying, he called for his own mama, the way every human does when death comes, music knocking. But his mama wasn't there. Only Hannah was. Hannah, who'd lost her own babies, who'd walked 800 kilometers in chains. Music, who'd survived everything he'd done to her and risen up stronger. I ain't your mother, Hannah said, her voice soft now, almost gentle. I'm your judgment. She pulled the chain one final time. Music. Tighter, until the iron that had bound them all became the thing that freed them from him forever. Slade's body convulsed, his legs kicked out, knocked over his whiskey flask, sent his pistol skittering across the floor. His hands clawed at the chain, at his own throat, at the air itself, desperately seeking something to grasp, some way to music live, just one more minute. But there was no more minutes, no more hours, no more days of dealing in human flesh, of cracking whips, of breaking music spirits. The convulsion slowed, the kicks got weaker. That one good eye started to glaze over, the pupil expanding, music the light going out of it like a candle in wind. Hannah held the chain tight and whispered, "This is what it feels like to be owned, to have your breath controlled by another, to die knowing you're nothing but property. How's it feel, devil? How's it feel?" Slade couldn't answer. His mouth fell open, slack and silent. His body went limp. The terrible rattling breath finally stopped. For a long moment, nobody moved. The cabin was silent except for the crackling of the fire, the afternoon wind through the broken window, the sound of their own breathing. Then Hannah released the chain. It fell away from Slade's neck with a heavy thud, leaving marks, deep, angry welts that mirrored the ones on her own throat, on Isaiah's, on all of theirs. She stood, looked down at the body. No triumph in her face, no joy, just exhaustion that went bone deep. "It's done," she said. Isaiah stepped forward, put his massive hand on her shoulder. "You all right, sister?" "No." Hannah's voice cracked for the first time. "But I will be someday." Delilah began to sing. Low, mournful. A prayer for the dead that wasn't for Slade, but for all those he'd killed. A prayer for the 18 who hadn't made it. For the 9 who survived. For the countless thousands who'd walked roads like this all across the South. They left the cabin, then left Slade's body lying there with the chain wrapped around his neck. Music, his black coat spread beneath him like he was already in his coffin. Let the buzzards have him. Let the earth take him. Let time forget him. But before they went, Hannah did one last thing. She took Isaiah's tooth, the one she'd carried as a relic and reminder, and placed it in Slade's dead hand, closing his fingers around it. "So, you remember us?" she said. "In whatever hell you're going to, you remember that we won. Remember that the enslaved rose up. Remember that your chains became your doom." They walked out into the late afternoon sun. The road stretched before them, red clay, bacon under Georgia heat. But now they walked it as free people, not just legally free. They were still runaways, still hunted, but free in the way that matters most. free in spirit, free in soul, free from the weight of his chains and his cruelty. Behind them, mile marker 799 stood like a gravestone, 1 kilometer short of Augusta, 1 kilometer from where the march should have ended. But for Hannah, for Isaiah, for Delilah, and all the survivors waiting in the swamp, this was where the journey truly ended and the new one began. The chains had come full circle. The collar that bound had become the collar that freed, and justice, dark and necessary as it was, had finally been served. The old ones say that some stories don't end. They just keep walking, passing from mouth to mouth, generation to generation, like spirits that refuse to be laid to rest. This here is one of them stories. Hannah and the 8 survivors, Isaiah, Delilah, Pearl, Esther with her baby girl, and 4 others, whose names deserve remembering. Benjamin II, named after the Benjamin who died of fever, Grace, Solomon, and Ruth. The third Ruth, who carried all 3 names in her heart, they stayed in that Georgia swamp for 2 more weeks, hid during the day, moved at night, living on roots and fish, and whatever mercy the land provided. Delilah taught them everything she knew about survival, music, which plants healed, which ones killed, how to read the stars for direction, how to move through water without leaving tracks, how to call on ancestors when hope ran thin. That old root woman became their Moses, their guide through the wilderness. Even though her body was weary and her years was heavy, Isaiah stayed their protector. His back was a map of scars that would never fully heal. Music. But his spirit remained unbroken. At night, he sang the old songs in Yoruba, and the others joined in, their voices rising through the cypress trees like prayers made of sound. They sang for the 18 who hadn't made it. They sang for themselves, the 9 who had. Pearl found her voice again, started speaking about little Jacob, not with just grief, but with love, remembering the good moments, the way he'd laughed, the games they'd played back before the auction block, turned her sorrow into story, music, and that's how the dead stay alive through the mouths of those who loved them. And Hannah carried that weight different. Now the rage had burned itself clean when she'd wrapped that chain around Slade's neck, and what was left was something else. Not peace exactly, more like purpose. She had 3 children out there somewhere, Josiah, Eliza, and baby Ruth, scattered across the South like seeds thrown to the wind, and she made herself a promise. She'd find them or die trying. On the 15th night after Slade's death, a conductor from the Underground Railroad found them. A free black man named William, who'd been scouting the swamps for runaways, drawn by stories of a woman who'd killed a slave trader and burned his ledger of souls. The rumors had spread fast, whispered in slave quarters, sung in work songs, passed along the invisible network that connected all black folk in chains. "You, Hannah?" he asked when he found their camp, his eyes full of respect and wonder. "I'm Hannah," she answered. "They talking about you from Virginia to Alabama. Say you're the woman who walked 800 kilometers in chains and strangled the devil with that same iron. Say you got the ancestors walking with you. I just did what needed doing." William smiled. "That's exactly what Harriet Tubman said first time I met her. You remind me of her. That same fire, that same refusal to stay broken." He looked at the group. "I can get y'all north. Got stations set up, safe houses, folks who will hide you and feed you and pass you along the line. It ain't easy and it ain't safe, but it's a chance." They talked all night making plans. Some wanted to go north immediate. Solomon, Grace, and Benjamin II chose that path, ready to put as much distance between themselves and slavery as possible. Pearl decided to go with them, carrying Jacob's memory toward freedom. But others had different callings. Esther wanted to stay in the South, wanted to join a maroon community in the deep swamps where escaped slaves built their own towns, raised their own children, lived free even in the heart of slave territory. Ruth III chose the same path, ready to fight rather than run. And Hannah told William what she needed. "My babies was sold. Josiah to a plantation west of here, Eliza to Charleston, Ruth to God knows where. I need to find them. Need to try at least." William's face went grave. "That's dangerous work, near impossible. Slave catchers everywhere, masters who won't give up property without a fight." "I walked 800 kilometers in chains," Hannah said simply. "I can walk 800 more without them, and I can fight now. Ain't no master going to keep me from my children, not after everything." Isaiah stepped forward. "She don't go alone. I'm with her long as she'll have me." Delilah nodded. "Me too. Got a few years left in these old bones. Might as well use them for something that matters." So they split, these 9 survivors, each choosing their own path to freedom. Some went north on the Underground Railroad. Some went deep into the swamps to join the Maroons. And 3, Hannah, Isaiah, and Delilah went searching for lost children in a land that still wanted them dead or enslaved. Before they parted ways, they stood in a circle one last time, held hands, sang the songs Isaiah had taught them, remembered the names, old Samuel, little Jacob, Thomas, Moses, Caleb, Miriam, and all the others, swore to tell their stories, to never let the world forget what happened on that road from Richmond to Georgia. "We survived," Pearl said through tears. 18 died, but we 9 survived. That means something, don't it? "It means we carry them with us," Hannah answered. "In every step we take toward freedom, they walk too. In every story we tell, they live again." They said their goodbyes at dawn, watched each other disappear into different futures, not knowing if they'd ever meet again in this life. But they knew they'd music meet in story, in memory, in the mouths of children yet unborn, who'd hear about the Coffle from Richmond, about the woman who killed the devil, about the 9 who survived. Hannah, Isaiah, and Delilah turned south, back toward the places they'd been dragged from, back toward the auction blocks and plantation grounds where children still cried for their mamas. It was dangerous. It was near suicidal. But Hannah had walked 800 kilometers in chains. What was another 800 on her own 2 feet with the ancestors at her back and vengeance in her heart turned into love? The last anyone saw